Chapter 777. In this wilderness, a tea guest actually appeared, leisurely and contented. It was abnormal no matter how one looked at it. Ling Han and the others all stopped and walked towards that person. This was a man as gentle as jade, and looked to be about 30 years old, filled with the charm of a mature man. A full head of black hair draped over his shoulders, appearing somewhat wanton and unruly. This person obviously arrived at Ling Han as well. He put down the teacup and said, "Tea is truly a good thing, able to cultivate one's character and clear one's heart to comprehend Tao. Sir, sitting in the middle of the road, are you planning to invite me to tea?" Ling Han said with a smile, and walked over with large strides. The man took out a cup from the tea tray, filled it, and said, "Why not?" Ling Han pulled out a chair and sat down, facing the man. He raised the cup, smelled it, and said, "It's indeed good tea." The man cracked a smile and said, "This is dragon birth tea. Legend has it that it grows after bathing in the rain of true dragons, and can only be picked once every 100 years. It's unknown whether it's the rain of true dragons, but its preciousness cannot be doubted. The aroma of the tea overflows, lingering for a long time." Thanks. Ling Han took a sip and couldn't help but relax his brows. He should have also planted such good tea in the Black Tower. "Please enjoy." The man extended his hand and made a gesture of invitation. Ling Han took a few sips, put down the teacup, and said, "I haven't asked for Sir's name." The man smiled faintly and said, "I'm called Corpse Boss." Pooh! Ling Han almost sprayed out a mouthful of tea. He thought of many possibilities, but didn't connect the other with the Thousand Corpse sect. No matter if it was Rong Huan Xian Corpse 2 or the Ninth Underworld King, they all carried corpse chi, but the one before him was cultured and refined, like a well-read scholar. It was truly impossible to connect him with the Thousand Corpse sect. According to Corpse 2, Corpse Boss was even more perfect than him. This was truly perfect to the point that it didn't seem like a corpse reincarnating at all. Corpse 2 could still feel traces of old age on his body, but he truly shed his old skin and obtained a new life. "This is really unexpected," Ling Han said sincerely. Hearing the name Corpse Boss, no matter how one thought about it, this person should be scowling furiously and brimming with killing intent. The difference between him and the person in front of him was really too great. Corpse Boss smiled faintly and said, "I rarely make a move to kill, but those who are worthy of me making a move, I will invite them to teach." "Is this the decapitation tea?" Ling Han asked. "You can say that." Corpse Boss nodded. "We can chat before we finish drinking." "Of course. Please. Please." The two of them didn't seem like enemies at all, chatting cheerfully and wittily. Corpse Boss was very knowledgeable, and no matter what topic they talked about, he could talk tirelessly, and Ling Han wasn't inferior in any way. He had lived for over 200 years in his previous life, so he naturally read widely. His wealth of knowledge was rarely matched by others. As he spoke and drank, the pot of tea was quickly emptied. After the two of them finished the tea in their cups, they suddenly stopped talking. Corpse Boss slowly put away the teacup into the spatial spirit tool, while Ling Han stood up, allowing the other party to put away the table and chair as well. "If you can block 10 moves from me, I'll spare you once," Corpse Boss said. Ling Han didn't dare to be careless. He couldn't see through Corpse Boss's cultivation at all, and according to Corpse 2, Corpse Boss had always been cultivating in the pond of the underworld, and would most likely come out only after reaching the Shattering Void tier. If this was a Shattering Void tier elite, then he would really be able to strike the skies and break through the 9 underworlds, terrifyingly powerful. 10 moves, if he were to rely on his own battle prowess, it would probably be extremely difficult. Ling Han unleashed the Revere Life Sword and was ready for battle. Corpse Boss very casually swatted a palm at Ling Han. Hong, heaven and earth dimmed, and a large hand appeared out of thin air, pressing towards Ling Han. Without any fancy tricks, it was an extremely plain palm. However, the power of this palm impressively reached the peak stage of the heaven tier. Ling Han brandished his sword to meet it, but was immediately sent flying by the large hand, shaking his whole body violently and almost spitting out a mouthful of blood. It was extremely shocking. His physique clearly reached the level of 9th tier rare metal, but his internal organs were still shaken under a single strike, as if overturning rivers and seas, extremely uncomfortable. Second move. Corpse Boss swung another palm, and its power inconceivably increased by a large margin. Although it still hadn't reached the level of the Shattering Void Tier, it really wasn't too far off. This guy was definitely a Shattering Void Tier existence. 10 moves to increase battle prowess step by step, and the third move's power would probably reach the Shattering Void Tier. Ling Han took another blow, and his whole body was slapped into a sheet of paper, becoming incredibly flat. However, he had managed to neutralize half of the might of such a terrifying blow. With his physique, he was completely capable of withstanding the remaining half. Coupling toughness and gentleness, Corpse Boss revealed a look of surprise. I never thought that you reached such a high level in physical arts, but this is only the second move. He swung his right hand again, and swatted a third time. This time, it truly reached the level of the Shattering Void Tier. The heavens trembled, and the earth cracked, moaning soundlessly under the Shattering Void Tier's battle prowess. Ling Han hesitated no more, and swung his right hand, scattering out 108 short swords, forming the Ice Dragon Ground Blast formation. The large hand swatted, but was forcibly stopped. An ice dragon appeared, blocking this palm. Corpse Boss looked surprised again. You're really surprising, actually being a formation master. This person was just over 20, but not only had shocking achievements in martial art, he also had the identity of a heaven-grade alchemist. Now, he even unleashed a 10th tier formation, truly inconceivable. How could a person possibly achieve such accomplishments? Corpse 2 said that you might be some Shattering Void Tier's reincarnation, possessing the soul of a previous life and being able to use the power of the realm, which makes some sense, Corpse Boss said. There was a limit to one's strength, and even if Ling Han started studying these three arts from birth, he wouldn't be able to reach the pinnacle in any one of them in 20 years, let alone all three at once. Other than Shattering Void Tier reincarnation, there was no second possibility. However, reincarnation and rebirth, this was unheard of. Like him and Corpse 2, although they still had the bodies of several 100,000 years ago, their souls were completely unrelated to their previous bodies. Although the body was still this body, could it still be considered a continuation of the previous body? Soul reincarnation was inconceivable, and it would shock the whole world if it were known. Ling Han smiled faintly and said, "There are still 7 moves." Corpse Boss's expression was solemn, and he raised his right hand in front of his chest. A shocking light condensed on his palm, and vein-like patterns appeared, emitting an ancient presence. Was this his previous body's martial art willpower? Ling Han was somewhat gloomy. He clearly knew that his opponent was holding back an ultimate move, but could only watch helplessly. He thought about it, and decided that he couldn't be so passive, unleashing Sunset Bow. Blocking 10 moves was blocking 10 moves, but it didn't say that he could only passively take a beating. Drawing the bow, knocking an arrow, and activating the Eye of Truth, he searched for Corpse Boss's flaw. Phone reading was more refreshing. Chapter 778. Ling Han shockingly discovered that Corpse Boss didn't have the slightest flaw. How was this possible? No one was perfect and no gold was pure gold. Even the world's most advanced defensive technique definitely couldn't be flawless. This was unrealistic. But now, a perfect and flawless existence really appeared. According to the feedback from the Eye of Truth, his arrow would be useless no matter where it was shot. Ling Han immediately came to a realization. It wasn't that Corpse Boss didn't have flaws, but that his strength was too weak. Shattering Void Tier elites were too powerful. So powerful that even if they stood still without moving, their static defense would still be perfect. No matter how much Heaven Tier elites attacked, it wouldn't matter. At least, Ling Han alone couldn't possibly break through it. This was the gap between tiers. Ling Han stood at the pinnacle of martial art in his previous life, but he was only in the Heaven Tier. Shattering Void Tier elites were similarly mysterious existences to him. And now, he was going to rival such an existence. Fortunately, there was still Ice Dragon Ground Blast formation. Ling Han operated his strength to the extreme. If even the Ice Dragon couldn't rival Corpse Boss, He would have to consider hiding in the Black Tower or using a power boost from the Black Tower. Although it was a pity, it was better than dying here. Corpse Boss attacked with a palm strike, and instantly, countless large stars fell from the sky, smashing towards Ling Han like a meteor shower. These weren't large stars, but rather condensed spiritual chi with origin power as the core. Under the enhancement of martial arts intent, they were heavier than stars, and it wouldn't be an exaggeration to call them large stars as they crashed down in sheets. This was a powerful move released by a shattering void tier elite, terrifying beyond description. The ice dragon roared, and waves of dragon cries rang out as it charged towards the sky. Instantly, a shocking light burst in the sky. Even with Ling Han's ability, he couldn't help but lower his head, not daring to stare. He was in the ice dragon ground blast formation, which was also a powerful defense, enough to resist the impact of shattering void tier 5 stars. Corpse Boss kept clawing with both hands, and countless large stars continued to fall, shining brightly and completely overshadowing even the sun's light. The ice dragon was extremely tyrannical. It possessed the battle prowess of shattering void tier 7 stars, and even possessed an immortal body. Even if it was crushed, it didn't matter. Spiritual chi condensed, and it could immediately recover. Its source was the formation. As long as the formation was not broken and there was no lack of spiritual energy, it could grow and multiply endlessly. Corpse Boss was very strong, but he wasn't strong enough to surpass the battle prowess of 5 stars of shattering void tier. Not only was he unable to deal with this formation, he himself was even being chased by the ice dragon. If it weren't for his extremely tough physique, it wasn't impossible for him to be insta-killed. He stopped and muttered, "One more move." Ling Han was greatly reassured. Although he completely couldn't see through the strength of the shattering void tier, he could still make a judgment through the confrontation between the ice dragon and Corpse Boss, and that was that Corpse Boss's strength was about 4 stars of the shattering void tier, and this was under the condition that he used his ultimate move. It was a pity that Ling Han was relying on the strength of the ice dragon. Otherwise, he might have been able to oppress the other party. After all, the array formation would not grow legs to chase after him. The ice dragon could only move within the range of the array formation and would disappear once it exceeded that range. After all, it was created by the array formation. One more move. Did Corpse Boss have an even stronger ultimate move? Corpse Boss opened his right hand, and there was actually a crystal-like bone hand in his hand. A skeletal hand should look terrifying and sinister, but this crystal-like bone hand seemed to be the most beautiful work of art. It didn't give off a sinister and terrifying feeling, but was instead filled with nobility. However, if one looked closely, they would discover that there were countless vein-like patterns on the bone hand, so many that one couldn't count them at all. Ling Han was shocked, and said, "This couldn't have been cut off from your own body by your previous self, right?" Corpse 2's white bone mallet was his own thigh bone. An existence that reached this level could even regrow a severed limb, but it just couldn't grow as fast as Ling Han. Undoubtedly, using one's own bone to make a spirit tool was definitely the most handy, and even more handy than a spirit tool nurtured by oneself. Corpse Boss shook his head and said, "No, this bone hand was indeed obtained by my previous self, but it definitely didn't come from me. According to my many years of research and speculation, this could be the hand of a god." What? Ling Han was shocked. The hand of a god. Wait, didn't this realm forbid the appearance of god-level elites? No, this was already a severed hand, and could at most be considered a divine tool. Even the Black Tower, Heaven Transformation Bowl, and Vial of Curses could exist, so why couldn't the hand of a god? The key was what kind of power could be displayed. Is it very strong? Ling Han said with a smile. The more crucial the moment, the more relaxed his nerves were. Very strong, Corpse Boss said solemnly. It can suppress and kill ordinary shattering void tier elites, and if it weren't suppressed by the realm's power, it could be even stronger. Then I'd like to experience it for myself, Ling Han said, waving the Revere Life Sword. This thing would similarly become stronger the opponent it met. Additionally, he had also flipped over the Heaven Transformation Bowl. Could he collect this skeletal hand and extract a few drops of Immortal's bone marrow? Corpse Boss held the crystal bone hand. One, vein-like patterns lit up, and quang, a clap of thunder immediately sounded in the skies. The heaven and earth felt it, and dark clouds rolled, gathering densely above Corpse Boss's head as if a heavenly tribulation was about to descend and strike him to death. It was that crystal bone hand that was too strong, threatening the existence of this realm. The Tao of heaven and earth was also alarmed, ready to act at any moment to open a spatial crack and expel it. Ling Han had seen the appearance of heaven and earth displaying its might. In Zi Shuexian's memory crystal, so what if it was as strong as a god? Once it burst forth with power that didn't belong to this realm, it would immediately be devoured and expelled. However, although the dark clouds rolled, no lightning struck down, and no spatial crack opened. Obviously, although the crystal bone hand was strong, it wasn't strong enough to make heaven and earth reject it. What a headache! Ling Han unleashed the Heaven Transformation Bowl. Wang, the treasured bowl shone, and began to collect everything in its surroundings without restraint, not even letting off ordinary stones, but was helpless against that crystal bone hand. Obviously, the Heaven Transformation Bowl couldn't do anything to it. The two's level should be about the same, so the Heaven Transformation Bowl couldn't do anything. Ling Han withdrew the Heaven Transformation Bowl and activated the Revere Life Sword with all his might. Even though he had carved out a Tier 10 formation, it was still difficult for him to grasp the formation patterns on the Revere Life Sword. Up until now, he could only activate 7 formation patterns, but the total number of formation patterns on it was more than 10,000. However, sensing the threat of the crystal bone hand, the Revere Life Sword began to awaken on its own. Killing intent pervaded the air, and it spun without wind. Within the vortex, there were actually many gaseous swords, pitifully small, but even shattering void-tier elites would feel fear. Corpse Boss's eyes couldn't help but flash with cold light, and he said, "This sword of yours isn't simple? I seem to have some memory, but I can't remember. Could shattering void-tier elites forget things? Of course not." Then, the so-called inability to remember definitely belonged to the memories of the previous body. After all, this was a newly born soul on the old corpse, and could be seen as two completely different living beings. Unfortunately, the Revere Life Sword could actually stimulate Corpse Boss to slightly recall the memories of the previous body, which was even more terrifying. How deep must the memory be to connect two souls for several 100,000 years? It was probably deeply engraved in the bones. Phone reading was more refreshing. Chapter 779. This is the cave of a human powerhouse, the turtle said. No. This should be a mountain gate, but most of the area has been destroyed, and only this place is left, the seahorse said. It's definitely an important place to hide treasures, the other demonic beasts said in unison. They were all using their divine sense to communicate, so they were able to skip the language barrier and directly communicate with each other. The treasures of the human race might not be useful to us, the crab said. He was a ghost face crab, and there was a pattern on his shell that looked like a malicious spirit. He had taken human form, but his large pincers were still the same. To demonic beasts, their bodies were divine weapons, and this was a gift from the heavens. Of course, they didn't mind having a few more high-level divine weapons. Then you can leave. I don't mind using the treasures of the human race, the large prawn said. He was a black armored prawn, and his entire body was pitch black. His shell was incredibly hard, and it was comparable to godly metal of the same level. He had also transformed into a human form. His body was covered in a thick layer of black armor, which was formed from his carapace. This was a residence that had been constructed by humans, so it wasn't suitable for their huge bodies. Moreover, it wasn't a water environment, so it was naturally most suitable for them to take human form. The ghost-faced crab humphed coldly and said, "I don't need you to tell me what to do. All right. There might be hidden dangers here, so let's find the treasures first before deciding how to split them," the octopus said. She was the only female here, and she had a head of gray hair that was combed into dozens of braids. However, upon closer inspection, each braid was actually a tentacle that was gently waving. Gray Cloud Octopus, fine, let's find out what treasures are here first. The sea demons came to a consensus and began to search this place. It's been too long and many things have already turned to dust. Damn it, this is the constellation Illusion Spirit Grass, a level 5 godly medicine. As long as there's enough of it, I can use it to break through to the Sun-Moon tier. This is the Strange Light Stone, and it can temper godly bones. It's a shame that it's already turned to dust. Otherwise, it could raise the defensive power of my armor to another level. Heavens, this is the 4 Emperor Pill. The sea demons continuously let out cries of shock and agony. They were shocked by the number of treasures here, and how precious they were. However, they were also extremely distressed because they had all turned to dust, and not a single one of them could be preserved intact. This treasure trove was divided into a large number of small rooms. They searched through them one by one, and arrived at the last room. And here, there was only a single stone. It was extremely ordinary. This was the first reaction of the sea demons. It was really too ordinary, and there was not the slightest bit of luster on it. It was the kind of thing that no one would take a second look at if it was thrown on the ground. But the problem was, could something that could be placed in the treasure trove really be ordinary? Without comparison, they wouldn't know. However, the treasures in the other rooms were all at the Sun-Moon tier, yet it just happened to be an ordinary-looking stone in this room. Who wouldn't be suspicious? What on earth is this? The sea demons were all curious. Let's study it first. There's no need to fight before we know what it can be used for, right? The demon face crab said. But all the sea demons gathered around. Because they had already come to a consensus, naturally no one dared to make a move. Otherwise, they would become the target of everyone else. However, this stone was really very ordinary. Moreover, it was very irregular, as if it had been knocked off from some large rock. They knocked on it a few times, touched it a few times, but there was still no reaction. They attacked, but this time, all of their expressions changed. That was because when their attacks landed on it, it was as if they had struck thin air. There was actually no effect at all. It didn't even budge in the slightest. Though I don't know what other uses this stone has, merely its ability to absorb attacks is too frightening, the gray cloud octopus said in shock. This stone slab was not as simple as being tough. Rather, it could absorb attacks, and this was the most terrifying aspect of it. All the sea demons revealed looks of greed. Even if this stone slab had no other uses, just its ability to absorb attacks was already heaven-defying. In that instant, several hands grabbed at the stone slab at the same time. Now that they knew that the stone slab had the ability to absorb attacks, everyone naturally wanted to get their hands on it. When the time came, with the stone slab's protection, their defense would increase by several times. All of you scram. It's mine. These sea demons all roared, and then began to fight. This was naturally a chaotic battle. Every sea demon's goal was to snatch the stone slab, and they had no intention of killing their enemies. However, as long as anyone had the chance to snatch the stone slab, they would immediately be surrounded and attacked. Thus, even if there was a sea demon here that was slightly more powerful, they would not be able to gain the upper hand in such a chaotic situation. Bang. However, right at this moment, the body of the golden patterned shark suddenly exploded. This gave the other sea demons a fright. What was going on? No one had attacked it, so how did it suddenly die? Right at this moment, they saw a figure appear, and it was already grabbing at the stone slab. It was Ling Han. Previously, he had not lingered for battle, and had directly entered the Black Tower. However, he had been swallowed by the golden-patterned shark along with the seawater. Just then he had appeared from the Black Tower, and unleashed his full power, instantly killing the golden-patterned shark. Even if it was a demonic beast, its organs were still incredibly soft. Human. Damn it. The other sea demons were all shocked and enraged. Although they belonged to different races and there was definitely no friendly relationship between them, most of them would even attack each other, they were all sea demons, so they naturally had to work together when facing an enemy. Moreover, Ling Han still wanted to snatch the stone slab. They all attacked in unison. Octopus tentacles, prawn crab claws, and turtle claws all attacked Ling Han. They were only in the early stage of the medium extreme, so they were completely insignificant. Although they did not know what method he had used to kill the golden-patterned shark, there definitely would not be a second time. Ping! Their attacks all landed on Ling Han's back. 5 attacks blasted at him at the same time, and all of them were at the consummate level of the mountain river tier. Most likely, no matter which one was in the medium extreme, they would be killed. However, although Ling Han spat out a mouthful of blood, his figure accelerated, and he grabbed the stone slab in his hand. What? The 5 sea demons were all stunned. How was this possible? He was only in the medium extreme, so to say nothing of their combined attacks, just one of them would be enough to kill this human. How was it that he only spat out a mouthful of blood? It was said that the physique of demonic beasts was tough, but looking at it now, this human was more like a demonic beast. Ling Han landed on the ground and only managed to steady himself after staggering a few steps. He felt a searing pain on his back. Although he possessed a physique on the level of level 3 godly metal, being attacked by the battle prowess of 5 consummate level cultivators at the same time still made him feel incredibly uncomfortable. He couldn't help but spit out another mouthful of blood. Then he spat out another 2 mouthfuls of blood, and only then did he feel slightly better. It was really fucking painful, Ling Han said in his mind. However, this stone slab was finally in his possession. Even if a heavenly body tier came, he wouldn't have to worry that they would snatch it away. Sorry, I'll be taking this. Chapter 780. When he heard these words, Ling Han was really a little shocked. He was someone who could surpass an entire major tier to defeat his opponent, but this kind of talent and freakish genius, once he stepped into the immortal level, it was actually very difficult for him to even cross a minor tier. Was it a blow to your confidence? Shuang giggled. Because every minor tier is difficult to cross, even the low extreme, medium extreme, and high extreme are divided into early stage, middle stage, late stage, and peak stage. According to my calculations, you're a genius that can fight peak stage at early stage. In the divine realm, such geniuses aren't a dime a dozen, but they're not few either. Ling Han's heart pounded. In the younger generation of the vast lands, no, among the entire vast lands martial artists, if he said he was second in a battle of the same tier, absolutely no one would dare say they were first. It was the same even if Sword Emperor and Setting Sun Saber Emperor were pulled back to this tier. A continent's number 1 in 10,000 years couldn't even be listed as a top genius in the divine realm. How freakish was this divine realm? Thinking again, the divine realm's resources definitely surpassed the mortal realms by countless times. Perhaps there was something nature-defying that could allow martial artists' battle prowess to soar, just like Ling Han once refined the Destiny Stone. Didn't the divine realm have it? Perhaps there was something even stronger. In a small world that was even despised as a mayfly world by Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire, Ling Han could grow to a level comparable to the divine realm's second-tier geniuses. After he entered the divine realm, couldn't he become even stronger? So what if he's a top genius? I can surpass him. Ling Han instantly recovered his confidence, and a smile rose at the corner of his mouth, filled with fighting spirit. At this moment, he couldn't wait to charge into the immortal realm and battle with the Sword Emperor, the Setting Sun Saber Emperor, and the others. Then, he would capture the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden and bring her back so that she could obediently become the daughter-in-law of the old Ling clan and warm his bed every day. Evil. Shuang shuddered. Why did your eyes suddenly become so perverted, brat? Are you fantasizing about this lady? Hehe. Ling Han spread his hands. What do you mean? Do you think this lady isn't pretty enough? Shuang was annoyed. Truly baffling. Ling Han changed the topic and said, what about you? What realm are you at? How many levels can you surpass? Shuang proudly put her hands on her hips and said, I'm an expert of the Sun-Moon tier. I originally reached the middle stage of the low extreme, but after being locked up for 100,000 years, my cultivation has fallen to the early stage of the low extreme, and my battle prowess has even fallen to the early stage of the low extreme of the mountain river tier. No wonder she could still easily suppress Corpse Boss. Although she was suppressed by the power of the realm, she could definitely unleash the power of the 9th layer of the Shattering Void tier, And who knew how many stars of battle prowess that was? When I was at the peak of my power, I was able to defeat a late-stage opponent with my early-stage cultivation. That was 2 subminor realms higher than me. In the God realm, I was known as a 2-star genius. Yi Shuang saw that Ling Han was somewhat indifferent, and immediately said, "What do you know?" In the God realm, surpassing 1 subminor realm is impressive, and known as a 1-star genius, 1 in a billion. Do you think those who can become gods are mediocre? That was true. In the vast lands, which shattering void tier elite wasn't a genius among geniuses? Wanting to surpass tiers to defeat them was difficult, and it was the same in the God realm. To be able to ascend to the God realm, aside from relying on medicine, as long as one broke through bitter cultivation, they were similarly geniuses among geniuses. To surpass tiers to win, it was difficult. So on and so forth. Above are 2-star geniuses, 3-star geniuses, and 4-star geniuses. As far as this lady knows, there are only a few 4-star geniuses in the world, and only in ancient books did a 5-star genius appear, Yi Shuang said unhurriedly. Ling Han was confident in himself. He only cultivated the first layer of the indestructible Heaven Scroll, which made him the #1 genius recognized by the martial arts stone. Hunyo didn't count, but if he cultivated the second layer, what level could he reach? He looked at Yi Shuang, smiled, and said, "I want to discuss something with you." "What? You want to covet this lady's treasure?" As if guarding against a thief, Yi Shuang held that crystal skeletal hand tightly. "Am I such a tasteless person?" "Hard to say." Ling Han was speechless and said, "Even if I covet it, I can't beat you, right?" "That's true." Yi Shuang finally relaxed and said, "What do you want to discuss?" "I'm lacking a 10th layer martial art cultivation technique, and want to borrow one from you first," Ling Han said. The martial art cultivation technique he grasped was only up to the 9th layer, and could only be cultivated to the peak of the heaven tier. Theoretically, he could indeed create a 10th layer cultivation technique and advance into the shattering void tier, but how much time would that take? Even if he already stood on the shoulders of predecessors, this might still be calculated in hundreds of years. He couldn't wait that long. "Ha!" Yi Shuang immediately laughed loudly and said very proudly, "Sure, but what do you use to exchange? Even if you borrow, you can't just say it without any proof and have to use something to threaten me, right? Say, what do you want?" Ling Han was prepared to be ripped off by her. After all, at least 100 years of time was more valuable than any treasure. However, he definitely wouldn't take out the Black Tower, Heaven Transformation Bowl, and Revere Life Sword. At worst, he'd sneak into the 5 great sects and think of a way to steal them. With the Black Tower in hand, this wasn't an impossible thing. "You came all the way from a small country in the desolate north. This lady doesn't believe that you truly relied on your own efforts. Quickly tell this lady, what secret treasure do you grasp?" Yi Shuang's eyes were burning, filled with curiosity. Ling Han said unhurriedly, "Actually, I'm the reincarnation of a shattering void tier elite, so my cultivation speed is obviously fast." Yi Shuang rolled her eyes at him and said, "Soul reincarnation in the divine realm is almost impossible, unless you obtain the exceptional divine item reincarnation soul flower." As if this lady would believe you. Moreover, if you reincarnate in the shattering void tier, you still need a 10th layer cultivation technique. And this girl wasn't stupid. Ling Han's heart skipped a beat. So soul reincarnation was extremely rare in the divine realm. How high was the grade of the Black Tower? Not only did it allow his soul to reincarnate, but it was also preserved for as long as 10,000 years, and even allowed him to constantly study the indestructible Heaven Scroll in these 10,000 years. He already overestimated the Black Tower, but now, it seemed that he still underestimated it. "AI, you don't believe me even if I tell you the truth, so there's nothing I can do." Ling Han shrugged. He definitely wouldn't reveal the secret of the Black Tower. "Then there's no way for you to want a 10th layer cultivation technique?" Yi Shuang said, displeased. No way was no way. There was nothing absolutely impossible in the world, and he'd just slowly think of a way. Anyways, he was still a distance away from the peak of the heaven tier. Go back. He called Helian Sun Shui and the others. He had to quickly settle the trouble in the East region. Phone reading was more refreshing. Chapter 781. The East region, in terms of martial art level, was second only to the Middle State and equal with the South region, both having heaven-tier elites overseeing. This invasion of the North region was originally rejected by the East region's elites, but how could they defy the will of the 5 great sects? They had to dispatch several heaven-tier elites, bringing along large numbers of deity transformation tier, spiritual infant tier, and flower blossom tier elites, using the 10th tier spirit tool lent by the 5 great ancient sects to open the region wall and launch an attack on the North region. Such a combination was obviously invincible, attacking cities and strongholds along the way almost effortlessly. Every city cooperatively chose to surrender. However, the elites of the East region didn't notice that almost every household worshipped a black tower, which was still endlessly gathering the willpower of the people. The power of the nation could only be devoured and eliminated through the form of national war. They were now like bandits, able to occupy a place, but unable to destroy the people's hearts. Of course, if the imperial city and the emperor were destroyed, then the country's root would disappear, and the country wouldn't be a country anymore, which was equivalent to hitting a snake where it hurt, equally fatal. The cooperation of various regions obviously came from orders. Ling Han already returned to the imperial city, deliberately luring the enemy deep along the way, letting them enter deep into the great Ling Empire's hinterland, and he would wipe them all out in one fell swoop. The enemy's advance was very fast, leaving Flower Blossom tier martial artists to oversee the occupied cities, while the elites continued westward, heading towards the imperial city. Ling Han, I want to discuss something with you. Just as he returned to the imperial palace, Ling Han was pulled over by Helian Sun Shui. Ling Han was shocked. Did this girl want to commit lewd acts in broad daylight? What's with your expression? Helian Sun Shui pulled him to the side and said, the sea race already sent people. Ling Han walked over to her and said, where are they? Beaten away by Yi Shuang, Helian Sun Shui said. This time, not only Xinyu royal family came, but my clan also came. Originally, I wanted to hide from them, but after knowing the truth of the reckoning, I felt that my clan could fight for it, so I wrote a letter and had that person from my clan bring it to my father. In other words, Helian royal family knows you're here with me, Ling Han said. Helian Shuan nodded. If you think that I did something wrong, I can leave. I will never implicate you. Ling Han pressed her down on his thighs and gave her a good spanking. He said, do you think I'm the kind of person who would abandon my child's mother? You deserve to be spanked. Well done, well done. Hunyo immediately jumped out from behind the stone pillar she was hiding behind. She jumped over in an instant and said, Ling Han, let's kill her and eat dragon stew, okay? Whoever fought with her for Ling Han would be treated as a target to be eliminated by her. It was a pity that Ling Han didn't allow it, causing Nyo to feel very helpless. Helian Shuan, however, flipped over and rode Ling Han underneath her. Her phoenix eyes were spitting fire, and she tore apart Ling Han's clothes with one move. She said fiercely, how many times do you owe me again? Shush. Hunyo hurriedly covered her eyes with both hands. This Nyo was really too dirty, wanting to pollute Nyo's pure heart. Hunyo is still here, aren't you afraid of polluting the child? Ling Han hurriedly flipped over again, pressing Helian Shuan under his body again. Hee, Nyo wants to play too. Hunyo pounced, thinking that the two were just playing. With Hunyo here, Helian Shuan obviously couldn't get her debt back. Under dissatisfaction, her temper was naturally a bit irritable. Fortunately, Ling Jianshui woke up and told her to quickly feed. Hunyo watched from the side and said, Little Shui, why does Shui look nothing like Ling Han? Still young, of course not, Liu Yutong said. She and Li Sichan would both help take care of Ling Jianshui. He was the current little ancestor of the Ling family, and from top to bottom, who didn't spoil him to the bone. Yaya? The little guy giggled, reaching out his small hand to grab Liu Yutong's chest. Obviously, he thought that the other's breasts were fuller and should be able to eat more and taste more, making Helian Shuan very depressed. A few days later, The East region's alliance of elites had already advanced to 100 miles outside the imperial city, and the next step would be to uproot the great Ling Empire's core, thus completely destroying this new dynasty. Ling Han led the crowd out. It was time to pull in the net. The East region's elites fought their way here smoothly, and who didn't know that the level of martial art in the North region was the lowest? Naturally, all of them were proud and arrogant, not thinking that there was any power in the North region that could stop them. They even found it strange that the North region only had this bit of strength, so why was the Middle State so nervous that they had to mobilize almost all of their top forces? Didn't they easily push through some great Ling Empire's imperial city? One more city, and everything would be settled. Ling Han brought Hunyo out to greet them. I am the great Ling Empire's emperor. You all dare to offend my empire and deserve to die 10,000 times, but seeing that you all are obeying orders, I'll give you all a chance. Surrender quickly and you can be spared. Ling Han said, his voice rumbling throughout the entire imperial city, and even through the totem, rang out in every city. This was the wonderful use of the totem, which could unite the entire great Ling Empire. Ha! After the East region's elites were stunned for a moment, they couldn't help but laugh. This brat was really an emperor. Was he sure he wasn't here to make a joke? A mere deity transformation tier warrior actually dared to summon them to surrender. He really didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Brat, I'll kill you. A deity transformation tier warrior jumped out. He looked like he was in his 40s, but his real age was at least over 200, which could be clearly seen from his blood. Ling Han walked over with large strides and said, if you can block one move from me, I'll spare your life. Bullshit, I'll kill you with one move. That person was greatly enraged and brandished a long saber as he charged over, his boiling aura shaking the air. His strength was quite shocking, and he could be considered an expert in the deity transformation tier. Ling Han had his hands behind his back, and in the instant that the other attacked, he casually delivered a palm strike. Pa! That person was instantly torn into pieces, and the essence and blood of a deity transformation tier warrior soared into heaven and earth, turning into a rainbow-colored divine light, extremely astonishing. Ling Han withdrew his hand and said indifferently, there aren't many chances left. Is there still no one willing to surrender? When this palm strike was delivered, all the East region's elites were shocked. That deity transformation tier warrior wasn't weak, and was a well-known elite in the East region, enough to rank in the top 100. This kind of elite was actually slapped to death with a single palm strike, showing how astonishing Ling Han's strength was. They had underestimated the North region. Who would have thought that there would actually be such an elite? A heaven-tier elite walked out, a cold smile on his face, and said, he's indeed not simple, possessing heaven-tier battle prowess at the deity transformation tier, and can be called an exceptional genius. But do you know that establishing a nation is a treason and heresy? Ling Han cracked a smile and said, may I ask, how is it treason and heresy? It's the rule set by the ancestor, what do you think? The heaven-tier elite said coldly. This group of people had already been brainwashed stupid, and they obviously had to be beaten into submission. Ling Han waved his hand and said mockingly, the ancestor is calling you, are you going to eat or not? Chapter 782. Nonsense. The Sky Being Realm expert rebuked. The rules set by the ancestors have all been weathered by the wind and rain for millions of years. Naturally, they are the truth. Ling Han laughed heartily and said, are you stupid? What ancestors' rules? Those were clearly set by the strong. I'm strong so I can speak. This is the truth that hasn't changed for tens of thousands of years. Since that's the case, this old man will beat you into submission. The Sky Being Realm expert strode forward, his essence energy bursting forth like a blazing furnace. Ling Han smiled and said, then I'll use you as a chicken and kill you for these monkeys. Impudent. The Sky Being Realm expert was enraged. He was a Sky Being Realm expert, a supreme existence in the Eastern region, and now he was being mocked as a chicken. How could he not be angry? He snorted and took out a long green whip. With a shake, the whip immediately straightened like a long spear. Elder Zhang is angry. He's going to get serious. That's only natural. Elder Zhang is a well-known figure in our eastern region. Among the 10 strongest, he can be ranked in the top 5. This brat actually dares to insult Elder Zhang. He's completely courting death. The eastern region's experts were all discussing spiritedly. They naturally thought that Ling Han was dead for sure. The Sky Being Realm expert's surname was Tan, and his given name was Zhang, but no one dared to call him by his name. Jia Zhang was one of the eastern region's leading figures this time. His move this time could be considered king against king, the strongest battle between both sides. Of course, in the eyes of the eastern region's experts, there was no suspense in this battle. Jia Zhang would definitely win. Ling Han extended his right hand and said indifferently, "I'll let you have a handicap of one hand." Flames immediately danced above Jia Zhang's head. Experts who had reached his level, even if they didn't cultivate fire attribute techniques, could still draw in the spiritual energy of heaven and earth with a single thought and turn it into flames. Of course he was furious. A mere deity transformation junior, no matter how shocking his talent was, dared to say he would let him have a handicap of one hand. This made his eyes spit fire. This junior really didn't know life from death. He brandished his whip spear and attacked Ling Han. Ling Han had never seen such a weapon before, so he couldn't help but be curious. He shifted his feet, wondering what was so special about this technique. Needless to say, this spiritual tool was truly extraordinary. It could be used as a spear, but after it was blocked, it could turn into the softness of a whip and lash out. There were also vein-like patterns engraved on it. After it was activated, it emitted a faint blue light, and its power was astonishing. For him to be able to be ranked among the strongest in the East domain, it was naturally not a boast. Unfortunately, his opponent was Ling Han. "My physique is comparable to 9th tier rare metal, so how are you going to injure me? Even if you use the strange fire to melt me, it won't be something that can be done in a short while. At the very least, it will take a few days and nights to be refined." Although Jia Zhang was fighting fiercely and seemed to have the upper hand on the battlefield, suppressing Ling Han, in reality, he was not a threat to Ling Han at all. It was only because Ling Han was thinking about the changes of the whip gun that he did not retaliate. "Elder Zhang, eliminate this audacious guy. That's right, kill this brat, and we can return to the East domain. The spiritual qi in this place is too thin. Every day we stay here is an extra day of loss." Everyone called out one after another, hoping to quickly finish off the errand of eliminating Ling Han so that they could return to the East domain as soon as possible. Jia Zhang naturally wanted to finish off Ling Han, but he understood in his heart that Ling Han seemed to be at a complete disadvantage, yet was extremely calm. It was definitely not something that he could take down in a short while. He couldn't help but provoke, "Junior, just how long do you want to hide here and there? The Imperial capital is right behind you, so where can you hide?" Ling Han just happened to be tired of this and said with a smile, "Do you want to be defeated so badly? Fine, I'll fulfill your wish." He extended his right hand, and golden light instantly shone. He had already circulated the earth-overturning seal and pressed it towards his opponent. This was a mystical power. Ling Han had long since cultivated the earth-overturning seal to the point that he could use it with both hands and use it with one hand. Thus, even if he only used his right hand now, his battle prowess was only slightly weakened. He instantly turned from defense to offense, and immediately took the initiative in the situation and momentum. These days, the Heaven-tier elites he encountered were all like Su Xiuran and Corpse 2, making him feel that Heaven-tier elites were very strong. But now that it was Jia Zhang, he suddenly had a feeling that Heaven-tier elites were very weak. Jia Zhang could be called a supreme elite in the East domain, but how could he compare to Su Xiuran and the others? What? Elder Zhang is actually being suppressed. How is this possible? My God, this must be fake. The East domain's elites all cried out in surprise while holding their heads. This was too fake. A deity transformation tier junior could actually suppress a Heaven-tier elite, and that was a veteran Heaven-tier elite who had been famous for a long time. Their outlook on life was about to collapse. Another Heaven-tier elite snorted coldly and said, "It's not a one-on-one fight now. Our mission is to annihilate the Great Ling dynasty, and now the king is in front of us. Brother Tu, Brother Ma, Brother Zhang, attack with this old man and eliminate this junior. But the other heaven-tier elites nodded one after another. Indeed, this wasn't a martial art competition, and there was no need to talk about any one-on-one rules. A total of 7 heaven-tier elites walked out together, surrounding Ling Han. Hu Niu instantly jumped out and said, "Niu will play with you guys?" Ling Han smiled and said, "No need, I'll take care of them." Since these people came together, he didn't have to keep the promise of using only one hand. He immediately unleashed the Revere Life Sword, and with a shake, soared light sword into the sky. With the support of power of the nation, he used the mysterious 3000. Instantly, 3,100 flashes of sword light burst forth, enveloping the 8 heaven-tier elites at the same time. What? Jia Zhang and the others were so shocked that their eyes almost popped out of their sockets. How could there be such a swift and fierce sword technique in this world, attacking 8 heaven-tier elites at the same time, and making everyone feel an irresistible sense of powerlessness? This realization was already too late. The sword light streaked past, and the 8 heaven-tier elites all fell, instantly dead. In the East region's camp, there was only dead silence. Too fuck you strong, how could there be such a freak, killing heaven-tier elites like cutting vegetables? Could this be a shattering void-tier elite? How could they resist? They couldn't resist at all. Ling Han withdrew his sword, and said indifferently, "How is it? Does anyone still want to surrender, or stubbornly resist to the end?" The heaven-tier elites of the East region had all died in battle, and the remaining were only deity transformation tier elites. Facing Ling Han, who was like a god, they couldn't summon the slightest bit of desire to fight. Some immediately surrendered, but some chose to flee. They didn't want to become someone's servant. Hu Niu showed her might, her body turning into lightning, and every grab was accurate. Who could escape from her hands? After luring the enemy deep in, she closed the door and beat them. The East region's punitive force was declared completely annihilated. Ling Han summoned all of them to surrender. In the face of death, very few people could face death calmly. Moreover, they were also ordered to attack and didn't have any irreconcilable enmity with Ling Han, so why did they have to die? Could it be that the middle state would really confer them the title of martyr? Chapter 783. Ling Han was in no hurry to leave, and simply began to practice his sword techniques in the Black Tower. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, breaking the regulations is why one's speed is infinitely increased, and when one slashes out, the opponent is completely unable to block it, Ling Han mumbled. Ling Han murmured. His figure flew out and slashed with his sword. He shot out, and the sword light was like lightning, but he immediately felt a sharp pain in his left leg. Lowering his head, he discovered to his shock that his left leg was actually left in place. Up to his ankle, it was broken, and a small section had even been twisted into the shape of a fried dough twist. Hiss, this is the consequence of breaking the regulations. The corner of Ling Han's mouth twitched, and he hurriedly put his left leg back in place. The indestructible heavens scroll circulated, and the wound healed. I've gone down the wrong path. Although my speed has increased, the damage to my body is even greater. However, this is also because I'm in the Black Tower, and my power can be infinitely increased. Otherwise, if I were in the outside world, I definitely wouldn't be able to instantly damage my bones to such an extent with my own power. I can't cultivate here, I still have to go out. Ling Han left the Black Tower, and immediately discovered that the water pressure that had crushed him to death had already disappeared. It was not quite right to say that it had disappeared. There was naturally water pressure in the deep sea, but this water pressure was like a light drizzle to him now, and could not shake his godly bones at all. In that case, I can also use my flight god tool. Ling Han drew out the cloud-piercing shuttle, and under his control, sure enough, the shuttle broke through the waves, and in a mere few breaths' time, it had already pierced through the surface of the sea and shot into the sky. As expected, Ling Han summoned Shui Yanyu, and told this seductive beauty everything that had happened just now. Invincible Sword Saint Shui Yenyu's expression was filled with confusion. She had clearly never heard of this name before. That was true. There were only heavenly body tier elites on Joint Peace Planet at present, perhaps in the ancient times. It was possible that there had been a glorious golden age of cultivation, and great elites of the Genesis tier had appeared, but now, they had long since withered away. The long passage of time could destroy everything, and it was impossible for Genesis tier elites to be immortal either. Unfortunately, you probably won't be able to learn this sword technique, Ling Han said with slight regret. He was not a person who treasured his skills, and good things would naturally be shared with his own people. Who says I can't? Shui Yinyu was very stubborn. Ling Han chuckled. He steered the cloud-piercing shuttle to a small island and decided to set up camp here. He wanted to master the fast technique first. He studied this sword technique with Shui Yinyu, yet Shui Yinyu was completely at a loss. She had no idea where to start. In reality, Ling Han was also very confused. However, whenever he encountered a bottleneck, the demonic power source in his dantian would release a mysterious power that helped him overcome the obstacle. This was the regulations of heaven and earth that corresponded to Genesis tier elites. It was impossible for Ling Han to comprehend it, yet with this help, he was able to grasp the fast technique step by step. It was as if the demonic power source had forced the fast technique down his throat. Thus, theoretically speaking, he was not qualified to cultivate this sword technique. However, the heavens were helping him. The Jade Box had landed in the Demon Master's resting place, and he also had the Black Tower that could suppress the Demon Master's essence. Moreover, he had also cultivated the indestructible Heaven Scroll. It was only because of these factors that he was able to reach his current level of cultivation. Even so, Ling Han's progress was still ridiculously slow. When he unleashed his sword, Ling Han felt indescribably awkward. His hands, feet, waist, and every other part of his body was twisted. It was difficult to exert force, and he couldn't exert force. In any case, it was indescribably strange. He slowly overcame this feeling, and the speed at which he unleashed his sword also became faster and faster. However, the faster he unleashed his sword, the greater the burden on his body. Every time he unleashed his sword, his godly bones would clang. If it were Shui Yinyu, each and every bone in her body would definitely be shattered. So fast! Shui Yinyu exclaimed as she watched Ling Han's progress. With every passing day, the speed at which he unleashed his sword would become slightly faster. In the beginning, her eyes could still capture the light of Ling Han's sword, but now, it was already completely insufficient. His hand moved, and his sword arrived. This was how fast he was, and it was beyond common sense. No wonder he had the title of Invincible Sword Saint. This kind of sword technique was practically nature-defying. This is only one form of the four-form sword technique. Then what kind of power does the slow technique, chaos technique, and calm technique have? Ling Han and Shui Yinyu were both curious. A month later, Ling Han finally achieved small success in the fast technique. Moreover, with the help of the source of demonic power, his cultivation level had also advanced to the middle stage of the medium extreme. Moreover, he also took some time to concoct alchemical pills, and he finally succeeded in concocting the Heavenly Pearl Pill. Come on, let's go kill some more pirates, Ling Han said with a hearty laugh. Now that he had mastered his sword technique, he naturally had to improve its might through practice. They were riding on the cloud-piercing shuttle, so they weren't afraid of encountering Sun-Moon tier elites. This was more than enough for them to escape. The changes in the Star Sea didn't affect the Yang clan's business. On the contrary, their business became even more prosperous. This was because there was no longer supergravity in the sea, and more people came to search for treasures. In the past, only those at the mountain river tier or above could enter the sea. Now, however, those at the shattering void tier or even the heaven tier could enter the sea. The water pressure of around 3,000 meters or so posed no threat to them at all. Of course, the demonic beasts in the sea were still extremely dangerous. If they died in the mouths of demonic beasts while searching for treasures at the bottom of the sea, they could only blame it on their bad luck. Without the interference of demon masters, the cloud-piercing shuttle could unleash its greatest effect. Even if it circled the sea once, it would only take a day at most. Because they had drifted on the sea for a few days, Ling Han had also found out the sailing route of the Yang clan from Yang Taiching. Thus, he was also riding the cloud-piercing shuttle along the same route. He descended the shuttle and saw a large ship that was currently engaged in a fierce battle. This was a large ship of the Yang clan, and there was an elite of the Sun-Moon tier standing guard. Thus, the pirates naturally also sent out elites of the same level, and they were currently engaged in a great battle on the surface of the sea. In the past, this would have been impossible. However, now that there was no supergravity, Sun-Moon tier elites would have no difficulty treading on the surface of the sea. After all, they would be able to fly with their physical bodies if they advanced further. Ling Han stowed the spaceship away and joined the battle with Shui Yenyu. They launched a fierce attack on the pirates. The battle was far too chaotic. Although they had attracted the attention of some people when they descended from the sky, they naturally wouldn't attract the attention of elites because their cultivation levels were far too low. Regardless of which side they belonged to, they would simply kill them. Brat die. A pirate immediately slashed his saber toward Ling Han. He was an elite at the peak stage of the medium extreme, and he was confident that his cultivation level was superior to Ling Han's. Thus, he launched an unbridled attack. Ling Han smiled faintly and activated the fast technique. The pirate swung his saber, yet he was shocked to discover that his arm had been detached from his body. Then, he felt his body shatter into pieces. He had actually been sliced into several pieces in an instant. Only then did he realize with shock that he had been sliced into pieces. Could it be that his head had also been sliced off? When had this happened? He hadn't even seen his opponent attack. This was the last thought that flashed through his mind. Chapter 784. Not long after, several powerful figures appeared. Although they deliberately retracted their powerful presence, there were shadows of the sun, moon, and stars when their eyes opened and closed, frighteningly shocking. They were definitely almighty-shattering void-tier elites. Sun Shui, the man in the middle, said. He wore a 5-colored brocade robe, tall and sturdy, with 2 small bumps on his head as if horns were about to grow out. This was a very obvious characteristic of dragon race descendants, but not everyone was like this. For example, Hellion Sun Shui didn't have clear dragon race characteristics, but her bloodline was quite pure. Greetings, father. Hellion Sun Shui bowed. Not to mention that the other party was Hellion family's patriarch and her father, just being a shattering void-tier elite required reverence. Ling Han thought for a moment and said, I'm Ling Han. Greetings, seniors of the Northern Seas Hellion family. Hellion family didn't clearly express whether or not to accept him as a cheap son-in-law, so Ling Han naturally wasn't willing to stick a warm face to a cold butt. Let's do it step by step. You guys invited me here, so let's release a friendly signal. Apart from Hellion Rong, the other 5 glanced at Ling Han, revealing dissatisfaction. It was this man who destroyed the cooperative relationship between Hellion and Xianyu, truly deserving of death. Hellion Rong nodded and said, let's go inside first. The 6 turned around and left. Hellion Sun Shui winked at Ling Han and followed. Ling Han, too, held Hunyo's hand and walked forward as he whispered, will your father trick us into going in and beat us up after closing the door? Although these words were spoken in a low voice, how could Hellion Rong and the others not hear them? Their faces couldn't help but twitch, having the urge to beat up Ling Han. Hellion Sun Shui also looked embarrassed, glaring fiercely at Ling Han. This guy was actually still playing around, and if she didn't have a son with him, she really wanted to give him a good thrashing. The group entered the hall and saw that many people were already sitting inside, and there were more people rushing over, old and young. The older generation had seats, while the younger generation could only stand around. However, there were also exceptions. A few young men with heroic spirit obtained seats, and they were very close to the front. This should be the next generation's leading figure of the Hellion family. Only then would he have the qualifications to be bestowed a seat. Ling Han swept a glance over them. Most of these youngsters were in the deity transformation tier, but there were also 2 who had advanced into the heaven tier. However, their ages were slightly older. It could not be seen from their appearances, but judging from their qi and blood, they should be in their 40s or 50s, which was not very accurate. Sun Shui, do you know your crime for running away from the wedding? One of the elders suddenly opened his mouth. His voice was thunderous, and it was filled with an intense interrogation. Is this a show of strength? Ling Han stepped forward bravely and said with a smile, Everyone, this time, my wife and I accepted the invitation to come to the sea race to discuss the matter of settling accounts. Why did you suddenly mention Sun Shui? If this is the case, we can only turn around and leave. Audacious human, you dare to be impudent in front of this old man. The elder from before shouted angrily. He was an elite of the Shattering Void tier, and with this anger, his aura shook, instantly making many people feel suffocated, as if their bodies were about to explode. Ling Han was fearless. When he and Hellion Sun Shui arrived, Hellion Rong and the other 6 Shattering Void tier elites personally came out to greet them. Although Hellion Rong did not say anything like welcoming him, it was also a kind of declaration, and the standard of treatment could be said to be quite high. Thus, this could be considered as one being soft and the other hard, one being white and one being black. Previously, they had shown their goodwill, and now, someone was going to play the black face and take Ling Han down a notch. If Ling Han did not step forward bravely, then it would naturally be displeasing to others. Seeing that his wife was being reprimanded, he became a coward. What good was there in having such a man? Ling Han said indifferently, If the Hellion royal family does not welcome us, then we'll just leave. Coming here, is it something you can leave just because you say so? Another Shattering Void tier elite spoke up. He was only in his 40s, and his physique was shockingly sturdy, reaching a height of over 3 meters. Standing there, he was like a small mountain, and the pressure was astonishing. Ling Han glanced at him and said, Oh, you still want to stop us? Come, make your move, and let me experience the strength of the sea race. If he blindly backed down, it would only make the Hellion family think that he was easy to bully, and then in the following negotiations he would be at an absolute disadvantage. So, he also wanted to fight and give the Hellion family a show of strength. Ha, you still want to challenge this general? The giant couldn't help but laugh. This was definitely the best and most arrogant joke he'd ever heard. A mere deity transformation tier actually dared to challenge a Shattering Void tier elite. Don't dare? If you don't dare, stop blabbering. It's not like you can make the decision, Ling Han said coldly. Fuck, this brat was too arrogant, right? Many people were furious. In their eyes, humans represented weakness, and now, a weakling actually dared to provoke the strong, which naturally made them shocked and furious. Too hateful. The giant wasn't Hellion royal family, but one of the 7 generals under the royal family, surnamed Yu. Shen Yu was also a great clan, a subsidiary clan of the Hellion royal family. The strongest person in the clan was this Yu Jianshan, who had the cultivation of the 3rd layer of the Shattering Void tier. The Hellion royal family had a total of over 30 Shattering Void tier elites, including these subsidiary forces. Only the Hellion family, the number of Shattering Void tier elites was around 20, which was extremely shocking. Before coming here, Hellion Sun Shui already analyzed the various great forces of the sea race, so Ling Han didn't lack understanding. The reason why the Hellion royal family could have so many Shattering Void tier elites was firstly because of the existence of ancestral blood, which made it relatively easy to advance to this level, and secondly because they were descendants of the dragon race, born with a longer lifespan, living 3 times longer than humans in any tier. The longer the time, the higher the possibility of breaking through, especially with 3 times the time, could create endless possibilities. Besides, the human Shattering Void tier elites only had a lifespan of around 1,000 years, but the sea race's royal family reached up to 4,000 years. With the accumulation of 3 more generations, how could there not be more Shattering Void tier elites? Haha, human junior, if you can take one of this general's moves, this general will allow you to speak. Yu Jianshan laughed in extreme anger. The others didn't speak, tacitly agreeing with Yu Jianshan's method. Obviously, he wanted to make Ling Han suffer a bit. Of course, they wouldn't go too far with Ling Han. Firstly, they really wanted to confirm the truth of the reckoning, and secondly, they suffered enough in Yi Shuang's hands, so they didn't dare. Third ancestor, why do you need to do it yourself? Let me do it. A similarly huge man jumped out, pointed at Ling Han, and said, I'm Yu Zai of the Xianyu clan. Human, die obediently. Seeing Yu Zai jump out, some people from the Hellion family instantly frowned. The Shattering Void Tier elites generally knew about the reckoning, and also knew the purpose of inviting Ling Han over, so even if they were enraged, they acted with propriety. However, the reckoning involved too many things, so how could they dare to let the juniors know? If it was leaked, it could bring about a disaster of extermination. Yu Zai was a crowd that didn't know the truth. Although he was only in the deity transformation tier, he reached the 9th layer, and his battle prowess was terrifying, comparable to a low-level heaven tier elite. If he accidentally killed Ling Han, the matter would similarly be serious. Phone reading was more refreshing. Chapter 785. Moreover, who in the Hellion clan didn't know that Yu Zai liked Hellion Xuanxue and had always been at her beck and call, but King Xiang was interested, but the goddess was heartless. Only when Hellion Xuanxue was betrothed to Xinyu Dongming did Yu Zai give up. It couldn't be helped. This involved the survival of the two clans, or else they might be destroyed by the Wenren royal clan. But now that Hellion Sun Shui gave birth to a son, it was obviously impossible for her to marry into the Xinyu royal clan again. Xinyu Dongming was even more dead, so his heart became active again. If Ling Han was killed, would he be able to fill in? He didn't mind being the one to take over. He indeed liked Hellion Sun Shui, or else any normal person would think that if you killed her man, would she still marry you? She wouldn't even look at you if she married a chicken or a dog. No one could guess Yu Zai's thoughts, so everyone wanted to dissuade him. They just wanted to give Ling Han a taste of their power and make him learn to be more obedient, but they didn't want his life at all. Just let him go. Hellion Rong waved his hand. If Ling Han still couldn't beat him in a battle at the same tier, then why would he want such a son-in-law? Yu Zai was instantly overjoyed. Did the clan king also have the intention of taking him in as a son-in-law? He strode out and said, Human, don't say I'm bullying you, I'll let you use only one hand. Hellion Sun Shui and Hu Niu both smiled. Others didn't know, but how could they not know Ling Han's strength? Not to mention this kind of deity transformation tier, even heaven tier elites could be instantly chopped into pieces. Even if Shattering Void came, wasn't there still the Ice Dragon Ground Blast formation? The Hellion clan wanted to give Ling Han a show of strength, but wasn't Ling Han the same? Ling Han smiled faintly, took 2 steps forward, and said, Really let me use only one hand? Of course, when have I, Yu Zai, ever gone back on my words? Yu Zai appeared full of confidence. Then thank you first. Ling Han smiled and said, In order to show my respect for you, I'll do my best. This is the greatest respect for you, right? Yu Zai grinned. This human was really a coward. I'm going to steal your wife, and you're still being respectful? Hee hee, I'm definitely going to steal this wife. He patted his chest and said, Use your strongest move. All right. Ling Han unsheathed the Revere Life sword and lightly drew a flower with the sword before holding it horizontally in front of his chest. All the Shattering Void tier elites narrowed their eyes, feeling a sliver of nervousness. Even if they tried to restrain themselves, it was still a terrifying thing for so many experts to feel nervous at the same time. Instantly, many people clutched their chests, their faces pale, and even those at the Celestial tier almost slid off their chairs. Shattering Void tier, standing at the peak of humanity, was terrifyingly strong. Yu Zai also retreated 7 steps in a row. Fortunately, Yu Jianshan pushed him from behind, making him stop his steps. Otherwise, he definitely would have sat on the ground. Human, does this sword have a name? A Shattering Void tier elite asked. He sensed a huge threat from the patterns on the sword's body, as if these patterns were activated, they could easily kill him. But this clearly wasn't a spirit tool. Revere Life sword. Ling Han caressed the sword's body, smiled slightly, and said, The original owner named it the #1 killing sword in the world. I think it's too arrogant, and killing harms the harmony of heaven, so it's better to cherish life. #1 killing sword in the world. Several shattering void tier elites murmured, their eyes glowing as they wondered if they should take out some treasure to exchange for the Revere life sword from this human, which was enough to increase their battle prowess by 10 stars. Yu Jianshan also looked solemn and said, Zai, don't be careless, this sword isn't simple. Yu Zai didn't take it seriously. No matter how strong a spirit tool was, it still depended on who was using it. Could a mere deity transformation tier elite unleash the power of a 10th tier spirit tool? At most, it was a bit sharper, so what did he have to fear? However, he didn't dare to contradict Yu Jianshan, and hurriedly said, Third ancestor, Zai understands. He took a few more steps forward, and said, Human, is this what you're relying on? Ling Han nodded and said, I'm poor, and only have this little bit of wealth, don't take offense. All the shattering void tier elites' faces twitched. Possessing such a peerless divine sword, and you actually said you were poor, then what kind of beggars were they? 10th tier rare metals were too rare, and not every shattering void tier elite could possess a corresponding spirit tool. Thus, many shattering void tier elites would extract a part of their body to make a spirit tool. Firstly, it was indeed more convenient, and secondly, they were forced into a corner. Of course, there were also people who used their own bones and old skin to make a spirit tool because it was more powerful. For example, Corpse 2's predecessor was definitely extremely powerful, and it was impossible that he couldn't get a 10th tier rare metal, yet he extracted his own leg bone to make a spirit tool. It was because he was too powerful, and other spirit tools weren't worthy. Make your move. Yu Zai was full of confidence. Firstly, he didn't know how terrifying the Revere life sword was, and secondly, the long-formed concept made him think that humans couldn't even withstand a single blow. Now that he had the advantage in tier, it was obviously as easy as crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten wood. So what if the opponent had a divine tool? Ling Han raised the long sword horizontally and began to operate 10,000 techniques return to 1. Once the sword intent appeared, Yu Zai's hair stood on end. He felt his entire body was ice cold, and he almost couldn't breathe. His mind was blank, and his hands were tightly clenched as sweat continuously seeped out. All the shattering void tier elites were also shocked. Although the sword hadn't been unleashed with their eyesight, how could they not judge that the destructive power of this sword was at least heaven tier 9 stars? Yu Zai was certainly a genius, being able to possess heaven tier battle prowess at the deity transformation tier, but it was at most 1 star. This gap was like heaven and earth. Yu Jianshan hurriedly stepped out to protect himself. If Ling Han unleashed a sword strike, this outstanding descendant would definitely lose his life. Ling Han pretended to be stunned and said, Didn't you agree to let me use one hand? Why do you want the two of you to join hands to fight me now? Yu Jianshan's face couldn't help but darken. You're fucking doing it on purpose. You're definitely fucking doing it on purpose. You clearly knew how terrifying the power of this sword strike was, yet you pretended to be a pig to eat a tiger, and fooled your foolish descendant. He snorted and said, Zai isn't your opponent, we admit defeat in this battle. How can that be? We haven't even fought, so who knows the outcome? Ling Han shook his head. Senior, don't be modest. Let this whatever fish have a showdown with me. Yu Jianshan almost smacked Ling Han to death. Showdown? What showdown? If Ling Han unleashed a sword strike, Yu Zai would be lying on the ground as a corpse. He snorted and said, Human, don't go overboard. Overboard? Ling Han said with a smile. I didn't bring a single soldier to come here, full of sincerity. But everyone, you're obviously all shattering void tier elites, yet you're all staring at me wanting to take me down a notch. Who exactly is going overboard? All the shattering void tier elites couldn't help but look embarrassed. This hit their weak spot. Chapter 786. What exactly do you want? Yu Jianshan suppressed the urge to slap Ling Han to death, and asked with a darkened face. Ling Han smiled faintly and said, If you can give me some compensation and comfort my wounded heart, I won't fuss over it. Everyone was tongue-tied. They'd seen shameless people, but to ask for benefits so openly, this was probably the first. If it was only Ling Han alone, Yu Jianshan obviously wouldn't throw him away, and would directly slap him to death and be done with it. However, this was the Hellion royal family's son-in-law. As a Hellion subsidiary, if he dared to kill the royal family's son-in-law, then the profound fish clan would definitely be razed to the ground. How could others touch the royal family? Even if they wanted to kill Ling Han, it had to be someone from the Hellion family, and others weren't worthy. After Yu Jianshan slightly gasped for breath, he waved his hand hatefully, and instantly, there were treasures all over the ground. There were blood-red corals, fist-sized pearls, and the entire place glowed, making many shattering void-tier elites' eyes light up, having the greed to reach out. This should do, right? Yu Jianshan snorted. Ling Han grinned as he put away the treasures and mumbled, blood coral has the effect of strengthening the physique, 1,000-year-old pearls. Although the effect is a bit lacking, the effect of stewing porridge isn't bad. Black tortoise shell can be refined into protective treasures. Not bad, not bad. Who wasn't an almighty being present? They obviously heard his murmurs, and all had the urge to beat him up. This wasn't just not bad, even they were tempted, and you still complained that the effect was a bit lacking? Ling Han put away the treasures, and said to Yu Jianshan, "Many thanks, but Senior must be very unhappy, feeling that he lost so many treasures for nothing. Why don't we make a bet?" "What do you want to bet?" Yu Jianshan said coldly. He didn't know whether this human brat was extremely daring or simple-minded to the point of idiocy. Ling Han cracked a smile and said, "Didn't Senior say you wanted to give me some pointers? Perfect, let's make a bet. If Senior can win against me, I'll return those treasures to Senior." When everyone heard this, they all felt that Ling Han had gone crazy. Wasn't he just asking for trouble? Hee, this human brat really knows how to conduct himself. Someone said, "What do you mean?" The others didn't understand. Ling Han was obviously arrogant. The first person said that human is definitely not Old Fish's match. There's no need to even think about it. But to make such a bet and return the treasure that he just obtained, do you think Old Fish will be very happy? That's true. Not only that, I owe this human a favor as well. Why didn't I think of that? The human race is full of tricks. They can't be trusted. However, this human really knows how to conduct himself well. From arrogance to deference, he first stung you a little before flattering you. Of course, this flattery feels great. This is too bad. He clearly didn't take anything out and only returned General Yu's treasures. That's why the human race is too evil. Ling Han's hearing wasn't bad, and he obviously heard it clearly. He couldn't help but have a strange expression. He didn't want to flatter Yu Jianshan, but rather wanted to trick him again. Was there something wrong with these people's brains? Who asked him to only be in the deity transformation tier? Who would believe that a deity transformation tier elite could rival a shattering void tier elite? Even Yu Jianshan thought that Ling Han wanted to reconcile, and couldn't help but reveal a smile. He said, "Fine, this general will accept this bet." After all, the other party was the son-in-law of the Hellion family. Since he was given a way out, he couldn't go too far. "Human, make your move." "I'll let you make 10 moves, make one more move," he said. Being willing to let Ling Han make 10 moves first was obviously giving enough face. Otherwise, how could a deity transformation tier elite last 10 moves against a shattering void tier elite? What kind of huge joke was this? Ling Han said, "What if Great General Yu loses?" Being misunderstood, he didn't bother to call Yu Jianshan Senior again. Directly calling the other party's official title wasn't considered impolite. Yu Jianshan was startled. You want to win, your brain must be muddled. But thinking that Ling Han might also want to leave him some face, he said, "If you win, this general will naturally give you a wager of the same value." "Then many thanks, Great General Yu." Ling Han clasped his hands. Not bad, he tricked another betrothal gift. Yu Jianshan didn't take it to heart, only thinking that Ling Han was borrowing a way out. He nodded and said, "Make your move. Point to Great General Yu for guidance." Ling Han casually waved, and 108 short swords were laid out. Wang, heaven and earth's spiritual chi rushed over, and the temperature instantly dropped. What formation is this? It seems to be very powerful. This human is actually a formation master. Didn't they say he's a heaven-grade alchemist? An alchemist, a formation master, and such amazing talent in martial art? Is he a freak? Everyone discussed animatedly, but when the temperature dropped lower and lower, and the spiritual chi condensed into a white pillar, even shattering void tier elite's expressions changed. Too powerful. Cold sweat rolled down Yu Jianshan's forehead. At this moment he really wanted to curse. Fuck you, I was tricked by this human again. This formation was too terrifying. But what was even more infuriating was that this human obviously could have immediately set up the formation, yet was taking his time to set it up. He was deliberately toying with him. But the problem was he had just said that he would give Ling Han 10 moves. How could he possibly attack first, and break through the formation before it was fully formed? Did he still have any shame? Yu Jianshan's chest was extremely stuffy. This was caused by anger. People said that falling into the same pit twice was an idiot, but his junior was just tricked by Ling Han, and in the blink of an eye, he also fell into the pit, making him depressed to the max. This human was too black-bellied, too sinister, too fuck-and tricked. After hooking Yu Jianshan's appetite, and when this great general's veins were about to pop out, Ling Han finally completed the Ice Dragon Ground Blast formation. Actually, he wasn't completely fooling around, but rather holding back, not wanting others to know how short of time he could lay out the formation, leaving a backup plan. The ice dragon appeared, and there were instantly ice shards falling from the sky, as if it had suddenly returned to winter, and an extremely cold one at that. Go. Ling Han pointed, and with his will, the ice dragon immediately coiled up, pouncing towards Yu Jianshan. This was very ironic. The sea race clearly revered the true dragon as a distant ancestor, but a human had to summon a true dragon. Although it was only an ice dragon, although it was only condensed by a formation, it still made the shattering void tier elites of the Hellion family feel hot. The ice dragon had shattering void tier 7 stars of battle prowess, but Yu Jianshan was only in the 3rd layer of the shattering void tier, and his battle prowess was also 3 stars, so how could he fight against the ice dragon? In the shattering void tier, the difference of 1 star in battle prowess was like the difference between heaven and earth, and the difference of 4 stars was definitely crushing. Yu Jianshan only resisted 7 moves, and had no choice but to admit defeat. If they continued to fight, he really might be heavily injured, and his face would be even more uncomfortable. He scattered a large pile of treasures, grabbed Yu Zai, and left the hall. He really had no face to stay any longer. Phone reading was more refreshing. Chapter 787. Ling Han temporarily set aside the unpleasant trouble, and first dealt with the matter at hand. He was going to sell a large number of heavenly pearl pills. He naturally had to ask Li Weiwei for help. If he sold them, he would definitely be forced to sell them at an extremely low price. Who asked him to not have any connections or background. However, if he asked Li Weiwei to act, who would dare to scam the daughter of the left minister? Even if Li Weiwei had to get a share of the profits, it would definitely be worth it. Li Weiwei had long since tasted the sweetness of earning money, so she naturally patted her chest and accepted this task. However, when she saw the number of heavenly pearl pills, she couldn't help but exclaim in shock, "Did you rob some alchemy clan? There were really too many." Normally, an alchemy store wouldn't even have 1% of this number. Ling Han chuckled and said, "I'll take 80%, and you take 20%. How about it?" Li Weiwei nodded gladly. She was only going to run an errand, and the price of alchemical pills was much more expensive than the ingredients. Even if it was only 20%, she would still be able to earn a lot. Ling Han met up with Lin Yu, Ma Xing, and the others. They were still in the Shattering Void Tier division, and if their battle prowess did not reach 20 stars, they would definitely not attempt to break through to the immortal level. Everyone felt rueful. They had entered into the Scarlet Heaven Academy together, and they had practically made no progress, but Ling Han was already in the medium extreme of the Mountain River tier. How could the gap between people be so big? Li Weiwei's work efficiency was very high. For the sake of money, this young miss was really going all out. In a short 3 days, She had brought Ling Han as much as 3 million true origin stones in income. Even if he split it 80% to 20%, the wealth that Ling Han had obtained was still as high as 2 million. He only kept a tiny bit of true origin stones for cultivation and maintenance of the puppet. The rest were all exchanged for ingredients to be used to concoct the Jade Heaven pill. Concocting a level 3 divine pill in the medium extreme was a little strenuous, but Ling Han had the Black Tower, so he did not need to worry about the temperature of the flames at all. Furthermore, his divine sense was strong and tenacious, far surpassing the average medium extreme. Thus, he was completely capable of concocting a level 3 divine pill. In the beginning, it was naturally all failures. In just over a month's time, he had squandered about 90% of the ingredients that amounted to more than 2 million. However, Ling Han finally saw the light of hope and found a clue amidst his failures. If he failed a few hundred or even 1,000 more times, he would more or less be able to succeed. This was money that he had to burn. Even Ling Han felt a slight heartache. That was because 2 million was not enough at all. He would have to add another figure like this. "I'm short of money." Ling Han scratched his head. He had clearly earned over 2 million not long ago, so how had he suddenly become a pauper? Was there a sucker that he could scam once? "Young master?" In front of Zhao Lun, there was a beautiful woman kneeling. Upon closer inspection, she actually bore some resemblance to Shui Yenyu. They were both beautiful and enchanting, but Ling Han kept on feeling that there was something lacking, as if something was missing. Zhao Lun was currently watching the ripples of the lake water with his hands clasped behind his back. It was as if thousands of golden snakes were dancing wildly. Upon closer inspection, his fingers were also moving rhythmically. He had cultivated an ancient mystical technique, and it was precisely to draw inspiration from the water to comprehend the laws of heaven and earth. "What is it?" he asked calmly. His tone was calm, and his expression was calm. It was as if he had completely walked out of the shadow of losing to Ling Han. "Ling Han and Miss Shui have returned," the beautiful woman said. Her name was Yang Luan. Zhao Luan's calm expression instantly twisted, and his right hand involuntarily clenched. Losing to Ling Han, even if it was because his cultivation level had been restricted, was still the greatest stain in his life. What more when Ling Han had been a couple with Shui Yenyu? This had touched on his reverse scale even more. Those two pieces of trash couldn't even complete such a simple task? Zhao Lun humphed. Now, Ling Han and Shui Yenyu had returned, yet Zhou Xiao and Fan Yong had disappeared. It was obvious that not only had they failed to complete their task, but they had also been killed by Ling Han. Though the truth of the matter was slightly different, the two of them had indeed failed to complete their task and had indeed died. Zhao Lun was a little confused. Those two people were both at the peak stage of the high extreme, and their battle prowess could surpass 2 to 3 stars. Moreover, they had been bestowed with 2 treasures, yet they still had not been able to kill Ling Han. That ant from a small world had come by opening the sky, and had really obtained the blessing of heaven and earth, so he couldn't be killed? "Could it be that I have to do it myself?" he said hatefully. A red sun appeared behind him. Though it was very small, it was a qualitative change compared to the mountain river tier. That ant from a small world was now clearly a subordinate of the 9th king. How many people would dare to openly deal with Ling Han? Were they not afraid of incurring the 9th king's wrath? Then, putting Zhao Lun aside, even if Great General Zhao appeared, it would be useless. "Young master, why don't we go to the Dark Night Hall and invite someone?" Yang Luodan suggested. Zhao Luan's expression involuntarily tensed up. He humphed and said, "How dare you?" The Dark Night Hall was the common enemy of the 3 majestic empires, and Zhao Lun was more so the son of a great general. If there was any news that he had colluded with the Dark Night Hall, and if it attracted the attention of the Empress, it was even possible that he would be executed upon investigation. Knowingly breaking the law was an additional crime. Yang Lun hurriedly knelt down and said, "Please calm your anger, young master." At first, Zhao Lun still wanted to reprimand her, but when he saw Yang Luodan kneeling on the ground and sticking out her perfectly round bottom, he couldn't help but be greatly tempted. Before he had advanced into the Sun Moon tier, Great General Zhao had not allowed him to get close to women at all. It was precisely because he was afraid that he would become engrossed in them and delay his cultivation. But this prohibition had now disappeared, and Zhao Lun could not get close to ordinary beauties. In his heart, there was only Shui Yanyu. But Shui Yanyu had shown that she would rather marry a pig or a dog than marry him, which made him very angry. That was why he had deliberately sought out Yang Luodan to become his follower. It was inevitable that he had the intention of using her as a substitute. But Yang Luodan was not Shui Yanyu, after all, so he had not been interested all this while. Only now, when he was stimulated by the news about Ling Han, did his self-control drop to rock bottom. He suddenly pounced on her, and began to take off her clothes in a monstrous hurry. "Young master, what are you doing?" Yang Luodan exclaimed in shock, but there was a sliver of smugness in the depths of her eyes. She was not willing to become Zhao Lun's follower. Her ambition was great, and she wanted to become the young madam of the general's residence. Zhao Lun straightened his back and entered Yang Luodan's body and began to madly sprint. Yang Luodan hugged Zhao Lun, a sliver of a smile tugging at the corners of her lips. The first step of her plan had already succeeded. "Young master, what do you think of my idea? We can conceal our identities. In any case, the Dark Knight Hall only recognizes money, not people," she said as she panted. Merely satisfying Zhao Lun's desires was useless. She would only be used as a tool for him to vent his frustrations. At this moment, how could Zhao Lun have any normal judgment? He nodded randomly and said, "I'll leave this matter to you." After saying this, he greedily sucked on Yang Luodan's chest, imagining her as Shui Yanyu. He couldn't help but become even more excited. Ling Han had already used up all the ingredients, but still hadn't managed to concoct the Jade Heaven pill. Now that his pockets were empty, he could only go and concoct some heavenly pearl pills to earn money, using pills to nurture pills. Time passed very quickly, and in the blink of an eye, 5 months had already passed. For cultivators, 5 months was only the blink of an eye, and it was no different from a few days in the eyes of ordinary people. But for Ling Han, a month's time was enough for him to undergo a huge change. The Jade Heaven pill was finally concocted, and he had also advanced into the late stage of the medium extreme. Reading on a cell phone was more refreshing. Chapter 788. Ling Han hesitated slightly, then nodded in agreement. First of all, battle prowess below Shattering Void Tier 7 stars couldn't hurt him at all, and elites above this were pitifully few. Was Hellion Rong just for show? He had the cultivation of the Shattering Void Tier 9th layer, and battle prowess even reached 10 stars. He was the top 3 experts in the North Sea, on par with Xinyu family's patriarch Xinyu Tong, and it was difficult to distinguish second and third. However, the first was definitely Wenren Jie of Wenren family. Although he was also at the Shattering Void Tier 9th layer, his battle prowess was shockingly 11 stars. 1 star, 1 world. Even if Xinyu Tong and Hellion Rong joined hands, they could only barely match Wenren Jie, and Wenren family's Shattering Void Tier strength was obviously higher than the other 2 royal families, forcing the 2 royal families to ally for self-protection. Xinyu royal family's ancestral land was also on a huge island, called Peaceful Star Island. It was extremely far from Dome Cloud Island, and even Shattering Void Tier elites had to travel for several days. Hellion Rong brought 9 Shattering Void Tier elites of the clan, plus Ling Han, Hellion Sun Shui, and Hu Niu, and rushed towards Peaceful Star Island. They didn't keep on traveling, and after traveling for 3 days, they stopped on a deserted island to rest, taking out all kinds of food and starting to eat. This was obviously in response to Hu Niu's strong request. Niu would accompany a fight, but not eating was out of the question. Even Hellion Rong and the others were full of praise for the food in the Black Tower. This was truly a delicacy that even immortals would drool, especially with all kinds of precious medicinal ingredients added, like 10,000-year-old treasured beads. How many were there in the entire vast lands? Even Hellion royal family couldn't take it out. There was no other reason than that every 10,000 years they had to settle accounts, and all living things would die out. Except for the living things in the mystery realm, how many could survive? This child is truly a genius. Helian Rong hugged Ling Jianxue, his brows smoothing out, his old bosom at ease. Ling Han still appropriately revealed some of his trump cards, such as a spirit tool that could accommodate living things, which was also rare in the divine realm, but not unique, so he dared to reveal his wealth. However, only the most trusted people knew that the Black Tower wasn't as simple as a spatial divine tool. Ling Jianxue was already half a year old, and his brute force had shockingly advanced into gushing spring tier. This was practically terrifying. When he was a bit older and opened up his spirit base to cultivate, his brute force would probably be able to break through to the flower blossom tier. The starting point would be shockingly high. This was because his ancestral blood was too pure and thick, and even Helian Sunxue was far from comparable, and the Sea race valued bloodlines the most, making Helian Rong have the impulse to make Ling Jianxue the next patriarch of the Helian family. Of course, this was also related to Ling Han's willingness to spend resources on his son. What 10,000-year treasure bead, 10th grade spirit liquid, this kid bathed in these good things every day. If his physique was not tyrannical, then there would be no justice in the world. The premise was naturally that Ling Jianxue could withstand such a medicinal effect. If it was someone else, even if they had the same father, they still wouldn't be able to withstand this blessing. Ling Han, Sun Shui is our clan's brightest pearl. Your first child has to be adopted into our Helian clan, and his surname will be Helian. Helian Rong decided to snatch his beloved away. This child was really too outstanding. Ling Han hurriedly shook his head and said, "This is my first son, so he obviously has to be surnamed Ling. This king has already betrothed the clan's brightest pearl to you, so shouldn't I want a grandson?" Helian Rong said shamelessly. This was a super genius, and his future achievements would definitely surpass his predecessors, and it was even possible for him to reach a height that rivaled the imperial family. So, no matter what, he had to fight for it to the end. Your Helian family is numerous and powerful, with clansmen numbering in the tens of thousands. My Ling family only has me as the sole heir, and you have the nerve to fight with me, not doing it. Ling Han winked, making Helian Sun Shui use the excuse of breastfeeding the child to snatch his son back. Helian Rong couldn't help but lament. A grown girl couldn't be kept at home, and once married out, she would belong to someone else's family, siding with an outsider too quickly. He refused to give up and said, "Then before the age of 5, this child will stay in the main family. After all, the main family's accumulation is deep and can give the child the best growth conditions. Besides, this king is also worried that Sun Shui won't have enough milk and will lose the child." Helian Sun Shui was dumbfounded. Was this still a biological father? In order to snatch the child, even his own daughter became the target of attack. "My chest is a bit small, but is it to the extent of starving my son?" Ling Han laughed mischievously, taking out all kinds of precious treasures from the Black Tower. Every time he took one out, Helian Rong's face twitched. The Helian family had some treasures, but the quantity wasn't that terrifying. You know, 1,000-year-old ginseng was counted in baskets, so how could this quantity compare? And the Helian family couldn't take out 10,000-year-old treasured pearl and 10th tier spirit liquid. Complete defeat. Helian Rong was speechless. Speaking of the child's cultivation, it was definitely better to follow Ling Han. A clan actually couldn't compare to one person. Helian Rong expressed great pressure, and the area of shadow in his heart was even larger. After all was said and done, he still got Ling Han to agree to let Helian Sun Shui's second child be adopted into the Helian family. The old guy was really very proactive, egging Ling Han and Helian Sun Shui to quickly rest and work hard to cultivate the next generation, making Helian Sun Shui go crazy. Another 5 days later, Tranquil Star Island was finally in sight. Xiao, a figure flew out, blocking their path. It was a martial artist with a pair of bird feathers growing on his back. His feet were like duck feet, webbed, and his mouth was flat, protruding long, looking very funny. However, Helian Rong and the others didn't have the slightest hint of a smile. For people like them who possessed the bloodline of divine beasts, the more atavistic their appearance was, the purer their bloodline was, and the more advantageous they would be in cultivating martial art. For example, if they were born in the form of a dragon, then as long as they grew up, they wouldn't need to cultivate at all. After reaching adulthood, they would be the strongest true dragon in the world, at least in the vast lands. Haha. Hunyo couldn't hold back, laughing loudly as she said, Ling Han, do you think this duck is better stewed or roasted? As soon as these words came out, Helian Rong and the others cried out inwardly. This wasn't an ordinary member of the sea race, but a fierce general under the Xinyu royal family, named Buluo, a dignified shattering void tier elite. At present, the old enmity with the Xinyu clan hadn't even been resolved, and you ridiculed their general. Wasn't this adding to the trouble? As expected, Buluo revealed an angry expression, and said coldly, well, so Lord Helian and the others came to eat this general. You've spoken. General O is a fierce general under the Xinyu king, who dares to be disrespectful to General O. Helian Rong said indifferently. His status was above Buluo's, and even if he interceded on Hunyo's behalf, he wouldn't lose his imposing manner. Buluo naturally would not bicker with a little girl. If that happened, the only one who would be embarrassed would be him. He immediately waved his hand, and said, the king has been waiting for many days. Please. His gaze swept over Ling Han, and there was a chill in it. Phone reading was more refreshing. Chapter 789. Ling Han killed Xinyu Cheng and Xinyu Dongming, and was even beheaded in public. For the Xinyu royal family, this was an extraordinary humiliation, and everyone hated Ling Han to the bone, viewing him as a mortal enemy. Now that this mortal enemy appeared, it would be strange if Buluo had a good expression. The group landed on the island. The residents here were either Xinyu royal family or vassal forces of the royal family, so their strength was quite extraordinary. But no matter how extraordinary they were, they didn't even have to breathe heavily in front of a shattering void tier elite. Ling Han and his party walked by, and everyone trembled in fear, almost unable to even stand steadily. Under Buluo's lead, they arrived at the Xinyu royal palace. Although they also called themselves kings, they didn't establish a nation, and were only called by the three great royal families. This was similar to the Ao family, the king of the four seas, called the royal family, but didn't establish a nation, only overseeing and regulating, respected by the four seas. Lord Helian, Xinyu royal family's leader, Xinyu Tong, came out to greet them. His figure was very slender, but he didn't have a small bump on his head like Helian Rong's. Instead, one of his arms was covered in scales, and his palm was completely different from normal people's, like a dragon claw. All the royal families had true dragon bloodline, the difference being the degree of purity, but they generally had dragon horns as their external characteristics, and growing a dragon claw like him could be said to be quite rare. Obviously, Xinyu Tong being able to become the leader of the Xinyu royal family was inseparable from this dragon claw, which bestowed him with powerful bloodline power, becoming one of the three strongest elites of the North Sea. However, he and Helian Rong had to join forces to be able to match Wenrenjie. That lord's strength was truly unfathomable. Lord Xinyu? Helian Rong cupped his hands. Is this human the murderer who killed this king's son? Xinyu Tong stared at Ling Han, his expression extremely unfriendly. This was natural. The hatred of killing his son was absolutely irreconcilable. Lord Xinyu, saying this right off the bat is a bit inappropriate, Helian Rong said indifferently. Xinyu Tong snorted and said, what you said had better not be the slightest bit false, or else this king will kill this boy at all costs. Lord Xinyu, do you think this king would joke about this kind of thing? Helian Rong said with a smile. Then please come inside. Xinyu Tong made a gesture of invitation. His attitude was still cold. Everyone entered the main hall. Because the matter of settling accounts was too important, outsiders were naturally not qualified to hear about it. Not only were there only shattering void tier elites in the main hall, but a great defensive formation was also activated, covering the whole island tightly. Ling Han once again explained the plan of the 5 sects of the God Realm, and also answered the questions of those from the Xinyu royal family, causing everyone's expression to turn ugly. Their reaction was the same as that of the Helian royal family. From shock to disbelief, and then to slowly acceptance and numbness. Even a shattering void tier elite would find it hard to accept such great news. However, they all believed him, because this could perfectly explain the gap in history, and it could also explain why they felt an inexplicable sense of crisis at the thought of breaking through the void. Xin Yu Tong tapped his finger on the table and said, "Lord Helion, we can form an alliance, but I have a condition." "What conditions?" Helion Rong asked. "This human's head." Xin Yu Tong pointed at Ling Han and said, "No." Helion Rong flatly refused. Putting aside Ling Han's potential, he still hoped that Ling Han and Helion Sun Shui would produce a descendant, preferably one with even purer ancestral blood, bringing the Helion royal family to greater heights, even surpassing the imperial family. Just a mere human? Xin Yu Tong snorted coldly. "Lord Helion, you have to consider it clearly. Do you really want to destroy the alliance between us for a human ant?" "Hee, you speak as if I'll die if you make a move," Ling Han interrupted. Helion Rong smiled and said, "How about this? Lord Xin Yu Tong will send out an expert with limited moves. Within these moves, this king will absolutely not make a move to help, but after these moves, all grievances will be settled." "Father!" Helion Sun Shui hurriedly exclaimed, but this was obviously just for show for Xin Yu Tong. However, women were good at acting, and the panic on her face couldn't be seen to be fake. Helion Rong waved his hand, indicating that Helion Sun Shui didn't need to say more. Xin Yu Tong couldn't help but be surprised. This human's tier couldn't be more obvious, only at the 5th layer of the deity transformation tier, and at best, only heaven tier battle prowess. In front of a shattering void tier elite, even the strongest heaven tier elite could only suffer grievances. What did he mean by this? Could it be that Helion Rong planned to sacrifice this human in order to form an alliance with him? Then again, a lowly human, so what if he died? Xin Yu Tong was still unsatisfied. Killing Ling Han was only revenge for his son's death, but Helion Sun Shui's escape from the marriage made Xin Yu royal family lose face. Could this account be written off just like that? Definitely not. "Alright then, 10 moves it is." Xin Yu Tong nodded. "In short, kill this human first, then slowly bargain with Helion Rong." In short, Xin Yu family definitely couldn't lose out. And when a shattering void tier attacked, it should have been settled in one move, so why was it limited to 10 moves? Obviously, it was to make Ling Han suffer in the first 9 moves, and then kill Ling Han in the last move. He sent people to inform the entire island to go to the Iron Blood Arena. This human actually dared to kill a member of Xin Yu clan, and if he wasn't executed in public, how could he appease this anger? The Iron Blood Arena was used for battle. Not only were the materials used to construct it extremely sturdy, but also a great defensive formation was laid that could withstand the impact of a battle of shattering void tier 5 stars, specifically used for battle. In battle, martial artists could better improve themselves, and observing the battle of elites also had great benefits. Thus, there were many seats in the Iron Blood Arena, enough to accommodate 100,000 people. Usually, there were even bets here with great wins and losses. Ling Han, Xin Yu Tong, Helion Rong, and the others all came here. Ling Han deliberately pretended to be unafraid of death, making the people of Xin Yu clan sneer. How long could you maintain such calmness? Later, just cry and beg for mercy. Helion Rong knew in his heart that he already used words to stop Xin Yu Tong, so it was impossible for the latter to attack. Then, who else in Xin Yu royal family could injure Ling Han? Besides, who would have thought that Ling Han was actually a formation master? Xin Yu Tong nodded to one person and said, You go. You must kill this brat in 10 moves." That person nodded and said, "Brother Wang, I understand." This person was called Xin Yu Ziun, Xin Yu Tong's younger brother. He was also an elite at the 5th layer of the Shattering Void tier, and his battle prowess also reached 5 stars. "Come down." Xin Yu Tong sneered at Ling Han. Ling Han cracked a smile and said, "Only need to block 10 moves? Shit, what do you mean only need to block 10 moves? Can you even block 1 move?" The people all around sneered. "You can still talk glibly now, and you'll soon be crying and begging for mercy." Chapter 790. That's right, as long as you block 10 moves, Xin Yutong said coldly. He swept a glance at Heli and Rong, meaning, you mustn't make a move or else this bet won't count. Heli and Rong only smiled faintly, his expression calm, as if he didn't care about Ling Han's life or death. However, he was laughing inside. The Helian family had been tricked by Ling Han before, and this time, it was finally Xin Yutong's turn to have a taste of it. Although he was one of the strongest, and was no longer moved by joy, anger, sorrow, or joy, he couldn't help but want to laugh when he imagined his old opponent's shocked expression. Just thinking about it made him happy, and he was really looking forward to it. Go down, Xin Yutong urged. Entering Xin Yu family's territory, did you still want to overturn the heavens? Ling Han put on an expression of facing death calmly, and strode into the battle area. The ground was made of strange stones, said to be produced at the bottom of the sea. Although it couldn't be forged, it was extremely hard, and its defense reached the level of 9th-tier rare metal. Added with the formation, its defense could rival 10th-tier rare metal. Instantly, waves of hissing came from the stage. This was the great sinner who insulted the Xinyu Wang family, and was going to be punished here today. Now everyone naturally knew that Ling Han was going to take 10 moves from Xinyu Ziyuan. On the surface, it was a battle, but in reality, wasn't it a sadistic killing? Xinyu Ziyuan had the battle prowess of shattering void tier 5 stars, and one move could instantly kill Ling Han. Some people not only hissed, but also threw all kinds of trash in their hands, but blocked by the formation, they all slid to the side of the stage, but their attitudes were completely clear. Quickly go and die. Ling Han looked at Xinyu Ziyuan, a middle-aged man in his 50s. With the long lifespan of a true dragon's descendant, he'd lived for almost 2,000 years, and could be considered a super antique. If it were a human, even a shattering void tier elite would be able to live for 2 lifetimes, but he'd only lived through half of his lifespan, truly making people envious and jealous. It couldn't be helped. Who asked his body to flow with the blood of a true dragon? Human. If you can take 10 moves of yours truly, you can leave this place alive. Xinyu Ziyuan revealed a cruel expression. Originally, with his status, it was beneath him to make a move against a mere deity transformation tier elite, but who told Ling Han to actually dare to kill members of the Xinyu family in public. One of them even had incomparably pure ancestral blood, and was the next successor to the family king. Ling Han smiled faintly and said, "Then please show mercy, my lord." "This seat will." Xinyu Ziyuan sneered. He would indeed be merciful in the first 9 moves, and when the other had the slightest hope, he would ruthlessly kill it. Only then could he truly vent his hatred. "Show me your moves." Ling Han made a gesture of invitation. Xinyu Ziyuan clenched his fist, and did not even circulate his origin power. Xiu, he just charged over and punched towards Ling Han. The speed of a shattering void tier elite was so fast that Ling Han didn't even have time to react. This punch directly landed on his chest, and pung, he instantly shot out like a cannonball. Ling Han heavily crashed into the stone wall at the end of the battlefield, and then bounced back, falling onto the ground. Even though he was actually prepared, he still felt a fiery pain in his chest. He certainly couldn't dodge the attack of a shattering void tier elite, but activating the Eye of Truth could see how powerful this attack was. Xinyu Ziyuan obviously wanted him to suffer for 10 moves, so the first attack only contained the power of 10 stars of heaven tier battle prowess, and was launched purely with brute force. This originally wasn't enough to injure Ling Han, but the opponent was a shattering void tier elite, and inadvertently carried a sliver of martial art intent, which was the source of pain for Ling Han. However, his physique was too tyrannical. Pain was pain, but it wasn't a major hindrance. He immediately crawled up, spat out a mouthful of black blood, and then moved his muscles and bones. Instantly, the bones all over his body crackled, and chi and blood soared, showing his extremely exuberant life force. Instantly, the stage was in an uproar. The sea race was considered to be half human and half beast, so every single one of them had a very strong physique. For example, the shells of the lobstermen and crabmen were enough to make warriors at the same level despair. It was impossible to pierce through them. However, their achievements were also limited. They could only reach the divine transformation realm at most, which was largely limited by their bloodlines. Because of this, they also knew how difficult it was to make physique reach the level of the heaven tier and the shattering void tier. This human did it. Too shocking. Are you sure you're a pure-blooded human, and not a half-human descendant of a divine beast? Even Xin Yutong's pupils contracted slightly, revealing a look of cherishing talent. It wasn't rare for a king of the sea race to have such a physique, as their bloodline endowed them with such ability. However, it was shocking for a human to reach such a height, showing this human's terrifying potential. Humans had the worst physique and the weakest physique, but in martial art, they had endless possibilities because they didn't have the addition of bloodline, and similarly wouldn't be limited by bloodline. Unfortunately, this human killed his son, or else he could really recruit him, and even marry a woman of his own race, and the descendants they gave birth to might also be extremely tyrannical. This thought only flashed through his mind. What a joke, this human had to die. Moreover, he'd already entered the iron blood field, and even he couldn't stop it. Otherwise, he'd go back on his word, and how could he still sit in the position of king? Xin Yuziyuan was also slightly shocked. He obviously knew how much power he'd used, which could heavily injure 99% of peak stage heaven tier warriors, but Ling Han was fine after spitting out a mouthful of blood. The vigor of qi and blood even made him a bit dumbfounded. The second move, he said indifferently, and raised his right fist again, increasing the power to 12 stars of heaven tier. Xiao, he flew out, and with a punch, Ling Han was sent flying again. Wah! Ling Han spat out another mouthful of black blood and lowered his head. His chest was slightly caved in, and his bones were all broken. With the shattering void tier's martial art intent, merely heaven tier's power could injure his physique. Truly shocking. This also showed that the shattering void tier's power crushed the heaven tiers by who knew how many times. Ling Han frowned slightly. Because of the shattering void tier's intent, Body of Diamond couldn't automatically heal his injuries. He operated the indestructible heaven scroll, and his whole body instantly shone with golden light, emitting an ancient and noble presence, as if he was an ancient emperor. His broken bones recovered at a visible speed, and in almost a breath's time, he recovered to his peak state, unharmed in qi and blood, exuberant with vitality. Although Ling Han already stopped the indestructible heaven scroll, the shattering void tier elites all revealed shocked expressions. That ancient and noble aura caused their souls to tremble. How could it be, a mere human, not the reincarnation of a true dragon? Why could he suppress them in terms of the height of the soul? 8 more moves, Ling Han said indifferently. Phone reading was more refreshing. Chapter 791. Everyone nodded. The peak stage of the consummate level of the Mountain River tier was only a step away from the Sun Moon tier, but this step was incredibly far away. Pseudo Sun Moon tier was the battle prowess that was infinitely close to the Sun Moon tier, but this cultivation level generally only existed in theory. Some elites had speculated that one had to be at least a 7-star genius to be able to approach pseudo-Sun Moon tier battle prowess when they were at the peak stage of the consummate level. However, 5-star geniuses only existed in legends, so where could they find 7-star geniuses? Thus, no matter what secret technique was used to increase battle prowess by 7 stars or even more, the price would definitely be massive. Perhaps after the eruption, the person would be crippled, or even die. This is a death trap. Someone came to a realization. They're going to kill Ling Han in front of everyone, and the price is a cultivator at the consummate level of the Mountain River tier. Humph. Which force is it? The Eternity Sky Majestic Empire, the Jade Sky Majestic Empire, or the Dark Night Hall? Aside from these 3 great forces, there's no other force that would be able to do something like this. These Sun Moon tier elites immediately ordered the guards of the Iron Blood Stadium to activate the restrictions. Regardless of whether they could stop the decisive battle or not, they couldn't just sit here and watch helplessly. Meanwhile, in another VIP seat, Zhao Lun was also giving pointers, saying similar things. He naturally wouldn't say that he had invited Wu Ziren from the Dark Night Hall, but he had a very thorough analysis of Wu Ziren's battle prowess. Quasi-Sun Moon Tier. Even he would have to expend a bit of effort to kill him, so killing Ling Han would be extremely easy. It would only take 1 or 2 strikes. Shui Yanyu immediately became nervous. She had been worried all this time, and now that she learned that Wu Ziren actually possessed battle prowess at the pseudo-Sun Moon Tier, her expression finally paled. Why was such an elite referred to as quasi-Sun Moon Tier? The words Sun Moon Tier and Mountain River Tier formed a huge gulf between them and the Mountain River Tier. This was a crushing gulf. She continuously comforted herself in her mind. It wasn't like Ling Han hadn't battled pseudo-Sun Moon Tier puppets before. Moreover, he had a whole body of treasures, and the number of trump cards he had was beyond anyone's imagination. Moreover, Ling Han's physique was extremely powerful. At worst, he would only suffer some injuries, and he would still be able to hide in the Black Tower. There was no way that he would die. As for how much trouble he would attract if he exposed the secret of his spatial god tool in public, that was something to worry about in the future. He would first escape this calamity before him. Meanwhile, Zhao Luan chuckled coldly. This time, Ling Han was doomed. Ling Han was astonished. He was no stranger to the aura that Zhao Luan exuded. Demonic Qi human could actually exude demonic Qi? Could it be that he had also refined the origin energy of a demon master like himself? No. In terms of quality, the level of this demonic Qi was very low. It was probably not much stronger than the Azura demon emperors. Zhao Luan's strength had suddenly increased greatly, and he had most likely taken advantage of the conflict between the regulations of the immortal realm and the regulations of the netherworld. The fast technique had only slightly disrupted the regulations, and it had already created a huge burden on Ling Han. Now, Wu Ziren actually caused the regulations of the 2 realms to collide and explode in his body. Although this would bring him terrifying power, the destructive power would naturally be far greater. After this battle, even if he didn't die, he would be severely wounded, right? He's really willing to go all out. Ling Han thought. At the same time, a strong sense of wariness rose up in his heart toward the Dark Night Hall. Using demonic Qi could actually increase one's battle prowess to such a terrifying level? He had no choice but to be on his guard. This was only the Mountain River Tier. If a Sun Moon Tier also used the same method, then wouldn't they be able to rival a Heavenly Body Tier? If there were more of them, wouldn't they be able to overwhelm a Heavenly Body Tier elite? However, he was thinking too much. Not everyone could withstand the impact of demonic Qi, and there weren't many people who would have the resolve to sacrifice themselves for the sake of a resplendent battle. Even in the Dark Night Hall, such sacrificial warriors could be counted on one hand. Die. Wu Ziren raised his battle prowess to the peak. Hong, his aura solidified, and like a great demonic god that could destroy the heavens and earth, he launched an attack at Ling Han. He raised his hand and delivered a punch at Ling Han. His fist became the size of a house, and as the fist pushed forward, a vacuum layer formed behind it. Even the space was distorted because of this. This was a power that was absolutely crushing. Even if Ling Han took a punch, he could be directly crushed into minced meat. Level 3 godly metal definitely couldn't block the power of pseudo-Sun Moon Tier. How could he block it? Ling Han retreated, but this was the Iron Blood Arena. The battlefield was indeed very large, but no matter how large it was, there was still a limit. He very quickly retreated to the wall, and Wu Ziren's punch had already arrived. Ling Han gave a light grunt, and his whole body stood upright on the wall. He pushed out his right hand and stretched it to his heart's content, turning his whole body into a perfectly straight line. In his hand, there was a brick. It was the absolute beginning stone. The punch arrived, and blood splattered everywhere. Wah! Ling Han spat out a mouthful of blood. The absolute beginning stone could completely absorb attacks, but it was only limited to an area of its own size. Although he had turned his body into a straight line, and did his best to hide behind the absolute beginning stone, it was still impossible for him to completely cover his body. His left shoulder had been completely smashed into minced meat, and half of his right foot was also missing. His left leg, which was at the crotch, had also lost 1/3 of its length. However, he had survived this blow. A drop of indestructible true fluid circulated, and in that one instant, Ling Han's wounds were completely healed. He instantly returned to his peak condition. He drew his divine sword and activated the fast technique. Wu Ziren was astonished, and he hurriedly raised a hand to protect his chest. This was because he had sensed that the sword light was shooting toward his heart. However, he had just raised his hand when he discovered that he couldn't exert any strength. It had been blocked by the absolute beginning stone. In that one instant, the divine sword had already pierced toward him. It was too fast. The tip of the sword pierced into his body, and his heart exploded. Die with me. Wu Ziren's eyes were bloodshot, and he suddenly opened his mouth to spit out a sound wave. This sound wave actually transformed into several hundred black-colored swords that were intertwined with demonic qi. These swords then shot toward Ling Han. The regulations of the two realms were different, and if demonic qi entered Ling Han's body, he would definitely be crushed by the Tao of heaven and earth. They were so close, so how could Ling Han dodge? Though he tried his best to dodge, and used the absolute beginning stone to block a few black swords, there were too many black swords, and there were still a few that struck his body. The defense of level 3 godly metal was useless either. The black swords destroyed his defense, and pierced into his body. Haha, I've still completed the mission. Wu Ziren's expression was filled with fervor. He was really a freak. His heart had been destroyed, yet he still hadn't died on the spot. True, his body had been damaged by the regulations of the two realms, and he was destined to die after this battle. Thus, his body had long since been destroyed, and his vital parts were not so vital anymore. I've disappointed you, Ling Han said calmly. What a joke. He had already refined the essence of a demon master, and nothing had happened to him. You wanted to kill him with just a bit of demonic qi? You were definitely dreaming. He shook his body lightly, and the black swords all shot out from his body, turning into wisps of black qi. Meanwhile, Ling Han's wounds were rapidly healing, and the blood that flowed out was also bright red. How is this possible? How is this possible? Wu Ziren's expression was filled with disbelief. His body had been invaded by demonic qi, yet he could still so easily repel it. He was unwilling to accept this, but with the last bit of power he had, he suddenly collapsed with a loud bang. Pa pa pa, his body exploded. Under the clash of the regulations of the two realms, not only did he die without a complete corpse, not even a piece of flesh remained. Chapter 792. Xinyu Ziyuan was like a divine dragon, arriving mightily and waving the dragon claw on his right hand, aiming straight for Ling Han's heart. This was a dragon claw, and could even scratch a hole through 10th tier rare metal. So what if this human's physique was tyrannical? But at this moment, the temperature suddenly plummeted, white snow fluttered, and ice shards danced. With a true dragon cry, a true dragon with an ice-white body appeared, coiling above Ling Han. The dragon's eyes glared angrily, emitting boundless divine might. Purng! The ice dragon met Xinyu Ziyuan head-on, sending him flying with a slap, and then pounced on him, violently tormenting him. Xinyu Ziyuan was very strong, possessing shattering void tier 5 stars battle prowess, but he couldn't stand against the ice dragon, which was stronger, reaching shattering void tier 7 stars. In the shattering void tier, 1 star was a world apart, and 7 stars wasn't enough to torment 5 stars. Xinyu Ziyuan screamed, desperately parrying, but was still beaten black and blue all over, obviously having already passed 10 moves. Apart from Helian Rong and a few others, everyone opened their mouths wide, completely unable to accept this outcome. The tables had turned. This human had turned the tables. He was obviously at the end of his rope, but suddenly had a great reversal, violently tormenting Xinyu Ziyuan instead. This was too unfathomable, too inconceivable, and too hard to accept. The corner of Xinyu Tong's mouth twitched. Only now did he realize that Helian Rong didn't want to give up on Ling Han, but that the other party simply knew that Ling Han had such a shocking trump card. No wonder this guy intentionally or unintentionally used words to trap him and not let him personally make a move. This was because this ice dragon's battle prowess surpassed 5 stars, but definitely did not reach 10 stars. If he made a move, there was still a possibility that he could kill Ling Han within 10 moves. Old fox, fuck, he was tricked. He waved his hand and directly reached in. With a light shake of his fist, he blasted the ice dragon flying, then grabbed Xinyu Ziyuan out. He gave Helian Rong a fierce glare, and said, "First arrange for a few esteemed guests to rest. This king wants to treat Ziyuan's injuries." Healing was a lie. The most important thing was how to end this. How could the 2 important figures of the Xinyu family die in vain? But they had already engaged in the wager in front of everyone, and after 10 moves, the grudges were settled. How could they go back on their word? If it was just Ling Han, then so be it. You're from the dignified North Sea royal family, are you going to bite me? But now, there was still Helian Rong. If this were to be spread out by the Helian family, where would the face of the Xinyu royal family be? Ling Han didn't get up, nor did he put away the ice dragon ground blast formation. Under the protection of this formation, he resisted the shattering void tear's will in his body, tempering his sword intent. This was actually very dangerous. If one was not careful, their divine sense would be destroyed by this will, and if that happened, even the Black Tower would not be able to save them. However, there was only a thin line between a genius and a lunatic. He believed that this was a good opportunity, so he would walk down this path with determination. Su Xiuran and the Small Sword Emperor had both grasped the Saber Heart and the Sword Heart respectively. This gave him a lot of pressure, and also made him unconvinced, giving birth to a sense of urgency to grasp the Sword Heart as soon as possible. 1 day, 2 days, 10 days, 1 month. He struggled to resist the will in his body. The shattering void tear was too strong, and the martial arts will that was unleashed was enough to exist for several hundred years. In this 1 month, this will destroyed almost 99% of Ling Han's body, and even his heart almost stopped beating. Now, only the consciousness still belonged to Ling Han's territory. He couldn't move his hands and feet at all, because his consciousness was cut off, as if it belonged to another person. Once the consciousness was also conquered, he would be a dead man. The small person formed by the spiritual infant sat in the consciousness, forming seals with both hands and developing various mystical powers to resist the invasion of the shattering void tear's will. The sword intent in Ling Han's body became more and more intense. In the Black Tower, the Revere Life sword vibrated lightly, and one formation pattern after another shone. Xiao, he suddenly opened his eyes and stood up abruptly. Golden light spread out from within his body, and that was the indestructible heavens scroll finally beginning to circulate, expelling the shattering void tear's will. Still a bit lacking, he sighed. He faintly touched the edge of Sword Heart, but it seemed to be separated by a layer of membrane that couldn't be pierced no matter what. Perhaps tomorrow, or even the next moment, he would be able to comprehend it, or perhaps he wouldn't be able to succeed in this lifetime. In terms of comprehension, it was like this. Still not putting away the formation? Xinyu Tong's voice sounded. How many days have you occupied this iron blood arena? Ling Han was startled. Although Xinyu Tong was berating him, his words no longer had the murderous intent from before. Could it be that Xinyu Tong was really going to keep his promise and let go of the hatred of killing his son? Strange, hard to believe. Put it away. Do you think that if Lord Xinyu wants to kill you, this formation can protect you? Helian Rong's voice was also heard. Ling Han laughed mischievously and put away the formation, thinking that if he really had to fight recklessly, he had the Black Tower, and killing shattering void tier elites was as easy as turning over his hand. However, this would draw in true powerhouses, and even he would suffer a calamity. Human, as long as you agree to this king's one condition, this king can let bygones be bygones and clear all grudges, Xinyu Tong said. Ling Han scratched his head and said, I won the bet, so shouldn't all grudges be cleared? Xinyu Tong snorted and said, you killed 2 people from the Xinyu family and won a bet, so you can only clear one person's grudge. Damn, could you be any more shameless? Ling Han was stunned. So shattering void tier elites could be this shameless. However, there was no murderous intent in his words, and Helian Rong seemed to be quite relaxed. Could it be that these two old foxes reached some kind of agreement during the month he wasn't here? He pondered for a moment, and said, "Then what's Lord's condition? Marry a woman from our clan, give birth to a descendant, and this grudge is cleared," Xin Yu Tong said indifferently. "Of course, this child has to belong to our clan. You killed a genius of our clan, so you obviously have to return one. Could it be counted like this?" Ling Han couldn't help but look towards Helian Rong. "This must have been leaked by you, right? Otherwise, how could Xin Yu Tong think of making him a breeding pig? What kind of father-in-law was this? A pimp?" Being stared at by Ling Han like this, Helian Rong's old face couldn't help but blush slightly and explained, "This king also let it slip after getting drunk. He got an astonishingly talented grandson and couldn't help but flaunt it." Xin Yu Tong heard it intentionally and associated it with Ling Han's freakishness, immediately having a flash of inspiration. If Ling Han could also leave a descendant for the Xin Yu family? So, as soon as they discovered that Ling Han had woken up, they immediately ran over. "I won't agree." Ling Han shook his head. He didn't have the slightest bit of a breeding pig's attribute and definitely wouldn't marry a strange woman to resolve grudges. Besides, would that woman be willing to marry him? Forcefully matching two people who didn't know each other at all, wasn't this just messing around? "Human, could it be that you're afraid that the woman you're going to marry is ugly?" Xin Yu Tong chuckled. Don't worry, that's a pearl of our clan, the only beloved daughter of our seventh brother. Her name is Xin Yu Kai. Not only is she as beautiful as a flower, her ancestral blood is also extremely pure. Among the younger generation, she can be ranked in the top 3. Even if I die, I won't marry this human." Right at this moment, a woman appeared in the distance, holding a shining sword in her hand. "Whoever forces me to marry him, if he doesn't die, then I will." Chapter 793. A Beautiful Romance. This woman was obviously Xin Yu Kai. Xin Yu Tong wasn't boasting. This woman's appearance was indeed extremely beautiful, not inferior to Helian Xuanxue at all, and her figure was even better, because her breasts were like waves, completely not as flat as Helian Xuanxue's. "Milord, forced melons aren't sweet. I have no intention, and Lady Xin Yu has no intention. Why force us to be together?" Ling Han said indifferently. Xin Yu Tong snorted, and said, "Marriage is not something that can be decided by juniors." Xin Yu Kai didn't dare to be rude to Xin Yu Tong, and only stared at Ling Han, and said, "If you dare to agree, I'm not done with you." Finishing, she leapt away, leaving behind only a beautiful silhouette. Ling Han smiled and said, "Milord can decide on Lady Xin Yu's marriage, but as for mine, sorry." Xin Yu Tong's expression turned cold, and he said, "Ling Han, have you weighed the pros and cons? As long as you nod, not only can you marry a beautiful wife, even the power of the Xin Yu royal family can be used by you to a certain extent. This king knows that if you establish a dynasty, the 5 great sects of the central state will definitely see you as a thorn in their side, but if you obtain the support of our family, you will have nothing to fear. And the price you have to pay is almost zero. Such a business that is sure to earn you nothing, and you still want to refuse?" Ling Han sighed and said, "I can only disappoint milord, I still choose to refuse." Xin Yu Tong stared at Ling Han, and after a dozen or so breaths of time, he suddenly laughed and said, Good. Although this king is indeed a bit disappointed, at the same time, this king is also very impressed. There aren't many people who can adhere to their principles anymore." Ling Han smiled and said, "Then what does milord plan to do next?" "Naturally to have you and Kai interact more. Youngsters, after understanding and communicating more, they will naturally get closer," Xin Yu Tong said. The others still hadn't given up on the idea. Ling Han didn't say anything more. How could he be so easily swayed? Xin Yu Xian changed the topic and said, "If you want to form an alliance, it's not impossible to resolve the grudge between us. I can indeed change the condition, as long as you bring me something." "What is it?" Ling Han asked. Thinking about it, he knew that this thing was definitely not ordinary, otherwise why would Xin Yu Tong bring it up? In 10 days the ghostly dragon cave will open, Xin Yutong said. True dragon's tooth? Helian Rong immediately exclaimed. Xin Yutong wasn't surprised. The ghostly dragon cave wasn't some secret in the North Sea, so how could Helian Rong not guess? He said, correct, it is the true dragon's tooth. As long as you get this item for this king, not only will we be even, this king will also give you a big gift. Helian Rong's expression, however, was solemn as he said, the true dragon's tooth is in the 4th layer of the ghostly dragon cave. Almost none of those who stepped into that place came out alive. Even if there were a few lucky people, they died very soon after coming out. There's clearly a simple and easy path to take, but this kid doesn't want it, so I can only choose a difficult path for him, Xin Yutong said with a smile. This king will still say the same thing. As long as you marry Kai, not only will the grudge between us be even, the matter of the alliance can also be settled immediately. Think about it carefully. Xin Yutong waved his sleeves, turned around, and left. He wasn't worried that Ling Han would run away, or else the other wouldn't need to come. The matter of the alliance was the difficult problem that choked the other's neck. Ling Han, however, was curious and asked, Father-in-law, what kind of place is the ghostly dragon cave? Helian Rong revealed a hint of reverence and said, because of the gap in history, who knows how many years ago, there was an almighty dragon in the North Sea who fell, and his body turned into the ghostly dragon cave. This almighty was really powerful, and his flesh and bones evolved into astonishing spirit medicines, but at the same time, there were also terrifying demonic beasts. The ghostly dragon cave is both a treasure land and an incomparably dangerous place at the same time. So powerful? Ling Han said casually. Legend has it that this almighty had battle prowess of 20 stars of shattering void tier, standing at the absolute pinnacle of humanity, and even gods couldn't rival him in the lower realm. So, after his fall, he produced such a strange phenomenon. His body turned into a mystic realm, unbroken for millions and millions of years, Helian Rong said, full of reverence. Although he also had battle prowess of 10 stars of shattering void tier, it was still much worse than that old dragon. This almighty was only one step away from becoming a true dragon, but unfortunately he still lacked the final leap and could only be called an alternative dragon, Helian Rong said with great pity. Before, he didn't understand why such a powerful existence didn't become a god, but now it was clear that this almighty was too powerful, surviving the reckoning. Even gods couldn't kill him in the lower realm, yet he didn't dare to shatter the void, and finally died of old age in the lower realm. This made him even more determined to split open the sky, or else he would either be refined into a pill or die of old age in the lower realm. There was no third possibility. Then what's the matter with the true dragon's tooth? Ling Han asked. The alternative dragon's entire body turned into the ghostly dragon cave, and only a dragon's tooth was completely preserved, containing endless dragon's power. This is a supreme treasure for every true dragon's descendant. Helian Rong also became excited. Obviously, the true dragon's tooth also had a huge temptation for him. Ling Han instantly felt a rush of excitement. Didn't his son have the bloodline of a true dragon? If he refined the true dragon's tooth, what heights could the little guy reach in the future? This deal was done. He asked Helian Rong about the ghostly dragon cave in detail, and Helian Rong didn't hide anything, telling Ling Han all the information he knew in full detail. The ghostly dragon cave was located in the west of the North Sea, and normally couldn't be entered because of the alternative dragon's pressure. Even if it had died for who knew how many millennia, the alternative dragon back then was really too strong, reaching the limit allowed by the vast lands, and could suppress a large number of shattering void tier elites even after its death. Every 500 years, the ghostly dragon cave would open once, and the duration varied, usually around half a month. The cave was divided into 4 layers, and each layer grew all kinds of spirit medicines, all born from bathing in the dragon's essence, possessing astonishing medicinal power. But at the same time, the alternative dragon's flesh and blood essence also gave birth to many strange creatures. They were powerful, but limited by the alternative dragon's body, unable to walk out. However, if one wanted to go in and pick the herbs, they would have to face these monsters, which was very dangerous. Additionally, aside from the true dragon's tooth, there was also dragon's blood grass in the ghostly dragon cave, which was second only to the true dragon's tooth. It had astonishing effects on tempering the physique, and could cultivate a dragon's body because of it. Very good, he also wanted the dragon's blood grass to refine for his son, laying the most solid foundation from childhood. He told his decision to Hellion Sun Shui. Hellion Sun Shui obviously wasn't at ease, and said, the first 3 layers of the ghostly dragon cave are fine. Although it's dangerous, there's always a chance of survival. However, the 4th layer is extremely dangerous, and those who enter are almost certain to die. The few that escaped were also heavily injured, and died not long after. Ling Han nodded and said, I'll do what I can. Chapter 794. With the ghostly dragon cave opening at hand, Ling Han, Hellion Rong, and the others set off directly, no longer having time to return to the Hellion clan to make arrangements. However, a great clan like the Hellion clan obviously wouldn't be thrown into confusion because of the clan king's departure, and would definitely organize personnel to enter the ghostly dragon cave. Xin Yu Tong didn't travel with them. He was the king of a clan, so he obviously had to personally lead the team. They traveled day and night, and after 5 days, they finally arrived at an island. Looking from afar, it looked like a crouching true dragon, hundreds of miles long and extremely spectacular. This was the ghostly dragon cave, and the entrance was in the east of the island. The group landed, and they saw that there were already many people here, clearly separated by a great distance from each other. Hellion Rong's gaze swept over, and revealed a hint of fear as he said, Wenrenjie is here. He stared at a tall man, who was filled with the domineering aura of a king. Standing there, he didn't deliberately flaunt his aura, yet it was as if he was the center of heaven and earth, allowing people to distinguish him from the crowd at a glance. Wenrenjie, the strongest warrior of the Northern Sea, possessing battle prowess of 11 stars of shattering void tier. Ling Han also took a few more glances at Wenrenjie. This person didn't have a trace of the dragon race's characteristics from his appearance, but the purity of his bloodline was clearly above Hellion Rong and Xin Yu Tong. The perception ability of the shattering void tier was astonishing. When Hellion Rong's gaze stopped on him, Wenrenjie immediately raised his head and moved towards Hellion Rong. His gaze flickered with killing intent, seeming to have the intention of finishing off Hellion Rong here and now. Hellion Rong didn't dare to be careless. The two's strength differed by 1 star, which meant that the other had the ability to kill him, extremely dangerous. Lord Hellion also came? Wenrenjie smiled faintly. His gaze swept over Ling Han, revealing a hint of displeasure. Ghostly Dragon Cave is such a holy land, and you actually let an outsider enter. Aren't you afraid of the ancestors' reproach? I'm already here, bite me, Ling Han said. He knew that the other party wholeheartedly wanted to exterminate the Hellion and Xin Yu clans, and was an absolute hawk. Even if he knew the truth of the reckoning, he would definitely kill Hellion Rong and Xin Yu Tong first, unify the Northern Sea, establish the foundation of the throne, and then think of a way to fight against the imperial family. Therefore, even if they had to ally with the Wenren royal family, they had to kill Wenrenjie. Naturally, there was no need to be polite. Wenrenjie couldn't help but laugh and said, Lord Hellion, you don't mind this king killing him, right? Of course I mind. Hellion Rong stepped forward bravely and said, this is this king's son-in-law. Wenrenjie stared blankly for a moment. He naturally knew about the alliance between the Xinyu and Hellion clans, and he also knew that the marriage partner of the Hellion royal clan was Hellion Rong's daughter. But now, how did this son-in-law become a human? If this king takes action, can you protect him? He said faintly. His voice wasn't loud, but it was filled with a frightening threat, as if he didn't put Hellion Rong in his eyes at all. You try. Hellion Rong wasn't the slightest bit weaker in terms of momentum. However, if the other party really wanted to make a move, he would definitely run away with everyone at the first instant. Fighting them head-on would only lead to death. He wasn't the slightest bit worried that Wenrenjie would harm the other members of the Hellion clan, because he could also make a move on the younger generation of the Wenren clan. It was precisely the rule that a king had to face off against a king, a general against a general, and a soldier against a soldier. Of course, if he was killed by Wenren, then he would naturally lose his deterrent force. Did this king miss something? With a long laugh, Xin Yutong also landed, forming a triangle with Wenren and Helian Rong. It seemed that he and Helian Rong were still in a hostile state, but one could also think that he and Helian Rong were attacking Wenren from both sides. Wenren had his hands behind his back, appearing unperturbed. He had absolute confidence that even if Xin Yutong and Helian Rong joined hands, he wouldn't be afraid. However, if the two of them joined hands, it would be very, very difficult for him to kill Ling Han. He brushed his sleeves and turned around. A mere human ant could be killed with a flip of his hand, so there was no need to take him to heart. Ling Han, I want to duel with you. At this time, a roar came from behind Xin Yutong, and an extremely strange man walked out. There was actually a turtle shell growing on his back, and his arms were two giant crab pincers. In the sea race, this was a symbol of the purity of bloodline. This person was called Pang Exin, and he had inherited the bloodline of both the spirit turtle and the demon crab, reaching almost 50%. In terms of bloodline purity alone, he was probably one of the best among the sea race. Unfortunately, neither the spirit turtle nor the demon crab could compare to a true dragon. Even 50% purity couldn't compare to 10% of a true dragon's bloodline, but the power of bloodline couldn't be ignored. He was only in his 40s, yet he had already stepped into the heaven tier, which was extremely extraordinary. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been qualified to come to the ghostly dragon cave. Ling Han swept a glance at him, and said with a smile, "Why should I duel with you? I definitely won't allow you to marry Princess Kai." Pang Xian shouted loudly. Ling Han couldn't help but laugh and said, "When did I say I was going to marry her?" On the other side, Xin Yukai's pretty face was filled with anger. It was one thing that she didn't want to marry Ling Han, but Ling Han actually went to the ghostly dragon cave to search for the true dragon's tooth in order to not marry her, which made her extremely displeased. How was she lacking that Ling Han avoided her like a snake or a scorpion? As a member of a royal family, a genius, and a stunning beauty, her pride couldn't accept it. Of course, if Ling Han wanted to marry her, she would also refuse, which was really contradictory. A lowly human obviously doesn't have the right to marry Princess Kai. Pang Exin pointed at Ling Han with his pincers. "Today, I'm going to beat you down, and then tell you that you can't even compare to 1/10,000th of Princess Kai, and shouldn't have such thoughts at all." Ling Han shook his head and said, "How strange, I can't be bothered with you." Pang Xian still wanted to say something, but seeing Xin Yutong wave his hand, he could only shut his mouth obediently. No matter how conceited or proud he was, he didn't dare to disobey orders, but he'd already decided that after entering the ghostly dragon cave, he'd find a chance to kill Ling Han and get rid of a strong competitor. He was the one who was worthy of Princess Kai. There were still 2 days before the ghostly dragon cave would open, and everyone waited patiently. Although the 3 great royal families were all here, they didn't start the battle. It really wasn't worth it to waste their energy here. The ghostly dragon cave was the true battlefield. 2 days later, a powerful dragon's might shook the ground, and the ground split open, revealing a giant whirlpool. The surging water made people feel intimidated at the sight of it, because there were terrifying patterns inside, and probably even spiritual infant-tier elites would be instantly strangled to death. Just in time, didn't miss? A long laugh came from the sky, and a giant warship was flying over at high speed. Its entire body was pitch black, and a flag was stuck on the bow of the ship, drawing a black true dragon that was baring its fangs and brandishing its claws, appearing murderous. West Sea, Mo clan royal family. Helian Rong and Xin Yutong frowned at the same time, and even Wenren revealed a strong hostility. The ghostly dragon cave was the North Sea's fated chance, so what was the West Sea royal family coming to join in the fun? Chapter 795. Hu Feiyun chattered on. She was still the same as before, completely unsophisticated, innocent, and romantic. She couldn't keep secrets at all. As long as she thought you were good, she would want nothing more than to dig out her heart and give it to you with just a few words. She wouldn't hold anything back. However, she probably knew that this ninth king's personality had some limitations, so Empress Luanxing didn't ask her to learn any confidential matters. She wouldn't be able to get any secrets out of her even if she asked. Ling Han had once asked about the origins of the other 8 kings in a roundabout way, but Hu Feiyun was completely at a loss. She only knew that the 9 of them were as close as sisters with Empress Luanxing. As for why, she didn't know the slightest bit. The origins of the 9 kings were all different, their surnames were different, and their appearances were also different. There was only one similarity, and that was that they didn't have parents. It was as if they had appeared out of thin air, and were suddenly conferred the title of king. Then, their cultivation levels skyrocketed, and they became the cornerstone of the empire. In fact, Hu Feiyun didn't even remember the past. She only knew that for as long as she could remember, she had been with Empress Luanxing. She didn't know who her parents were, and she didn't have any curiosity about the inheritance of her clan. This caused Ling Han and Shui Yenyu's hearts to thump wildly when they heard this. Thankfully, there weren't any female guards in the carriage. Otherwise, if she told Empress Luanxing what she had said today, perhaps she would silence them. Although they hadn't managed to find out any useful information, the origins of the 9 kings were all a little too mysterious. This in itself was possibly a taboo that couldn't be touched. One had to realize that aside from Hu Feiyun, the other 8 kings had all advanced into the heavenly body tier one after another. This was practically an inconceivable miracle. What right did Empress Luanxing have to have the potential to reach the heavenly body tier when she was still in the mountain river tier? Even a prodigy like Ling Han had a very high possibility of dying prematurely halfway through his cultivation. It was also possible that he would encounter some kind of barrier that he would never be able to cross. Strange, extremely strange. Hu Feiyun was carefree and carefree. She didn't look like she was leading troops to battle at all. Instead, she looked like she was going on an outing. There was everything in her carriage. There was a bedroom, a kitchen, and even a small garden. Because they didn't use their flight god tools, their speed naturally wasn't very fast. They spent a whole 2 months' time before they finally left the chaotic star's majestic empire and entered the territory of the Eastern Rain Nation. In that instant, Ling Han felt as if the power of the nation that had enveloped him all this while had disappeared. He could no longer receive any support. Thankfully, only he and the 9th king could draw on the power of the nation of the chaotic star's majestic empire here. Thus, the influence it had on the entire army was practically zero. These days, Ling Han had been making the most of the time to refine the demonic power source. Zhao Luan and Hu Feiyun's cultivation levels had both soared, causing him to feel pressured. This was the immortal realm, and there were all kinds of strange techniques. He couldn't be satisfied with his current speed of advancement. With the help of the Black Tower, his refining speed had indeed increased considerably. He successfully broke through the late stage of the medium extreme, and advanced into the peak stage of the medium extreme. His battle prowess had also risen to a whole new level. Unfortunately, he was still slightly lacking when it came to the refinement of the mysterious azure pill. He was burning through a lot of money, though, and was about to run out again. For a level 4 divine pill, if he failed, he would waste a few thousand true origin stones. Greetings, 9th king. After they entered into the Eastern Rain Nation, the higher-ups of the Eastern Rain Nation naturally had to come out to welcome them. Hu Feiyun had seen this kind of scene many times, and she didn't have any stage fright at all. She chatted cheerfully with the higher-ups of the Eastern Rain Nation, and then took the initiative to ask to join the battle. At first, the higher-ups of the Eastern Rain Nation weren't satisfied. Although the chaotic star's majestic empire had sent out a king, this king was far too weak. He hadn't even advanced into the Sun-Moon tier, so what use could this kind of elite be? If she joined the battle, not only would the pressure on the Eastern Rain Nation not be reduced, they would also have to spend a great deal of manpower to protect this king. Who didn't know that the Empress treated the 9th king like a sister? If anything happened to the 9th king, it was guaranteed that the Golden Lion Nation or the Eternity Sky Majestic Empire wouldn't even need to make a move. The Empress would personally destroy them. Moreover, Hu Feiyun had only brought a group of mountain river tier cultivators. However, when they thought about it again, these mountain river tier cultivators weren't simple. They were all the future pillars of the empire, and there were also descendants of supreme clans among them. If anything happened to them, would the forces behind them be able to hold themselves back and not make a move? Then the Eastern Rain Nation would instantly have the support of countless forces. With this thought, the higher-ups of the Eastern Rain Nation's worries immediately turned into joy. They hurriedly sent this army to the front lines of the battle, hoping that a few more people would die so that the chaotic star's majestic empire would send a stronger army. A few days later, the student army of the Scarlet Heaven Academy arrived at the banks of a large river. Opposite them was the army of the Golden Lion Nation, and they were facing off against the army of the Eastern Rain Nation across the river. This was a furious river, and the surging river possessed terrifying destructive power. According to the legends, this furious river had been created by a supreme elite with his sword. It contained the supreme sword intent of this elite, and it hadn't completely disappeared even after millions and millions of years. Thus, this river wasn't something that just anyone could cross. They had to use a ferry to block off the sword intent, and they also had to have elites of at least the Sun-Moon tier standing guard. The Golden Lion Nation was only a majestic empire, and they only had over 100 elites of the Sun-Moon tier. Thus, how could it be easy for them to escort an army across the furious river? This was a natural barrier that prevented the Golden Lion Nation from further invading. However, at the same time, it would also be extremely difficult for the Eastern Rain Nation to recover their lost territory. This furious river would instead restrict them. The Academy's army set up camp here. However, the students didn't mingle with the soldiers of the Eastern Rain Nation. Those who could enter the Scarlet Heaven Academy were all prodigies, so they naturally couldn't afford to offend these soldiers. It should be known that this was only the army of a majestic empire, and there weren't many mountain river tier elites. Most of them were at the Shattering Void tier, the Heaven tier, and the Deity Transformation tier. After a few days, the two factions couldn't see eye to eye with each other, and they almost started fighting among themselves. Left with no choice, the two armies could only separate. Normally, if you don't come to my place, I won't go to yours either. The river water does not interfere with the well water. The Golden Lion Nation didn't seem to be in a hurry to advance. Every day, they would only use their catapults to hurl a few fireballs over, causing some minor chaos. They didn't seem to have any intention of crossing the river to forcefully attack. On the other hand, the Eastern Rain Nation grew anxious. If this continued, the territory to the north of the Furious River would really become the Golden Lion Nation's territory. In the Immortal Realm, the most precious things were one's territory and subjects. These directly determined the power of a nation. Thus, the generals of the Eastern Rain Nation discussed with Hu Feiyun and decided to launch a counterattack. I agree. The flap of the tent was lifted, and a valiant-looking man dressed in a full suit of armor walked in. The armor was bright silver, and beneath the helmet was a handsome face. There was also black hair hanging down from his head, and he looked extremely valiant. Zhaolin, why is he here? Zhaolin half knelt on the ground, and said to the Ninth King, Your Highness, I've come under the orders of Great General Zhao. I've led a small group here to await your Ninth Highness's orders. A cold smile appeared at the corners of his lips. This was such a good opportunity. How could he miss it? It was normal for anyone to die on the battlefield. In that case, Ling Han would stay here forever. Cell phones read more easily. Chapter 796. Ghostly Dragon Cave was a very special place. It was formed from the body of an elite of the sea race. Back then, he had once cultivated to the peak of humanity, the true pinnacle. Battle prowess of 20 stars of Shattering Void tier was a completely despair-inducing height, and even the gods that broke through the realm couldn't do anything to him. Even though this expert had died, the power of the rules he cultivated was eternal, guarding this ghostly dragon cave. It could be said that as long as one was not as strong as this expert, they would have to obey the rules of this place. If the Shattering Void Tier couldn't enter, they would be killed upon entry. However, if the Shattering Void Tier couldn't enter, it didn't mean that they couldn't use the battle prowess of the Shattering Void Tier. Law decrees, forbidden tools, they could still be used, but this kind of battle prowess couldn't last long after all. Ling Han pulled Helian Sun Shui with one hand and Hu Niu and Qi with the other. The three jumped into the whirlpool together, and an irresistible force pulled them towards the bottom of the water. Xiao, just as they were spinning until the sky darkened, they suddenly emerged from a blood river. Wah! The people who entered first all vomited to their heart's content on the riverbank, but this number was obviously less, far less than 1/10 of the total. Although there was only one entrance, it should have sent everyone to different places in batches. Leave quickly. Ling Han's expression immediately changed, and he grabbed the two girls and leaped up, but he made a slight sound of surprise. This place actually couldn't fly, so he descended from the sky again. He exhaled, and borrowed this force to draw a few dozen meters horizontally, landing on the riverbank. Helian Sun Shui's expression was also unsightly. She was dizzy from the spinning just now, and now really wanted to vomit. On the other hand, Hu Niu acted as if nothing had happened, and instead clapped her hands, and said, "Let's do it again." Ling Han lowered his head. The clothes on his body showed signs of corrosion, caused by the corrosion of the river water. Although this corrosion was very slow, it was extremely stubborn. Even if he circulated the indestructible Heaven Scroll, it could only slow down the speed of corrosion and couldn't dissolve it. In other words, if he soaked in the river for too long, even he would be corroded into liquid. What river was this? Ling Han gazed into the distance. He didn't know how long the river was, but the river water was blood-red and emitted a faint fishy smell. Could it be that this is the blood of a subdragon? Helian Sun Shui said to the river after catching her breath. A true dragon had walked out of this world before, but it had definitely not cultivated into a true dragon here. There was no environment in the small world that could allow people with the bloodline of the dragon clan to complete the final leap. At most, they could only reach the level of a subdragon. Therefore, if this was the blood of a draconic dragon, its value would be indescribable. Ling Han shook his head and said, "Even if it's the alternative dragon's blood, it's contaminated and full of corrosive power. After a long time, I reckon that even 10th tier rare metals will be melted away." Other Shattering Void Tier elites might not be able to do it, but this alternative dragon had reached battle prowess of 20 stars of Shattering Void Tier, so it must have also cultivated the power of regulation. Using the power of regulation to refine, was there anything in this world that could not be refined? Unless it wasn't something from this world. This place is really desolate. Ling Han looked at the environment on both sides. This was a very narrow space, and aside from a blood river in the center that surged with blood-like water, the banks on both sides were only 300 meters wide. Then, there was nothing, as if a fault had appeared in the world. Since this was formed from the body of an elite, it obviously couldn't be extravagantly hoped to resemble a real heaven and earth. Which way? Helian Sun Shui asked. The source, Ling Han said after some thought. They were just about to set off when they saw a flash of sword light. Shua, a person had already charged over, and Sword Qi was eerily cold, assaulting them in the face. "Ling Han, I'm going to kill you." Ling Han swept a glance over, and very casually stretched out his hand. With two fingers coming together, he clamped down on the other party's long sword, and said indifferently, "So it's Princess Kai. It's not good to be so hot-tempered, it's easy to grow old." The person who attacked was Xinyu Kai. She used all her strength to pull out the sword, but discovered that the long sword seemed to have grown roots in Ling Han's hand, unable to budge no matter what. She was overwhelmed with shock. What kind of monster was this human? This sword was an 8th tier spirit tool, and its quality was excellent, enough to unleash the battle prowess of the peak stage of the deity transformation tier, but in Ling Han's hand, it was as powerless as an infant. She obviously heard of the battle between Ling Han and Xinyu Ziyuan, but always thought it was exaggerated, and that should have been the power of the formation. But now that she exchanged a few moves with Ling Han, she suddenly realized that the latter was indeed extremely powerful. Ling Han pushed his hand, and Xin Yu Kai instantly retreated. He also loosened his fingers and said, "For the sake of the Xinyu royal family, I won't lower myself to your level, but if you don't know what's good for you, I'll let you know what fear is." He wasn't afraid of the Xinyu royal family, but the other party was a power that could be won over. He didn't want to damage the friendship between the two clans because of an arrogant little princess like Xinyu Kai. Nyo loves eating dragon meat the most. Nyo threatened from the side. There were tears in Xinyu Kai's eyes. This human was too despicable. The clan elders wanted to force her to marry, but this human actually didn't want it, and now treated her fiercely, making her feel extremely aggrieved. What did she do wrong? She was the biggest victim. Let's go. Ling Han ignored Xinyu Kai. Though the distribution after entering was random, the three great clans occupied 99% of the places, and there was naturally no lack of members of the Xinyu royal family here, so there was no need for him to take care of this delicate little princess. However, they had just taken a few steps when they saw that Xinyu Kai actually followed them. Ling Han stopped and said, "Why are you following us?" "Who said I'm following you guys?" Xinyu Kai said with her head held high. "Can I walk this path?" "Sure, please." Ling Han made a gesture to make way. Xinyu Kai was furious, and strode past Ling Han as if she had a grudge against the earth, stomping loudly on the ground. After she had walked a long distance, Ling Han and the others set off again. This is a great beauty, why don't you take her in?" Helian Sun Shui said in a sour tone. Ling Han laughed and said, "You're jealous." "In your dreams." Helian Sun Shui obviously wouldn't admit it. Nyo is jealous. Nyo, however, didn't know how to conceal her feelings. She instantly pounced onto Ling Han, hung her arms around his neck, and said, "Ling Han is Nyo's, no one is allowed to snatch him away." Helian Sun Shui found it funny. Back then, Nyo was only 5 or 6 years old, and looked like she wanted to monopolize Ling Han. How could such a young girl have such thoughts? This is the first level of the Blood Dragon Cave? Wasn't it said that there would be various spirit medicines? Why can't I find anything? Ling Han looked left and right. The environment here was too simple, and it was obvious whether there were spirit medicines or not. "Do you think spirit medicines are cabbages that grow everywhere?" Helian Sun Shui rolled her eyes at him. Ling Han nodded and said, "Aren't they?" Recalling that Ling Han possessed the Black Tower, and that there were indeed spirit medicines everywhere inside, Helian Sun Shui was instantly rendered speechless. Chapter 797. Although the Black Tower could nurture spirit medicines, it was limited by Ling Han's strength. Now, aside from the dragon blood tyrant ginseng, there weren't many high-level spirit medicines, which made Ling Han very depressed because most spirit medicines were useless to him. He could only use Heaven Transformation Bowl to purify them before consuming them, and the effects were obviously not as good as refining them into pills. The beauty of spirit medicines lay in the fact that they could not only increase cultivation, but also had other effects. For example, divine medicines of heaven and earth each had a specific spiritual effect. So, Ling Han was quite interested in the spirit medicines here, especially the dragon's bloodgrass. One had to know that he cultivated the 9 dragons tyrant body art, and if he refined the dragon's bloodgrass, he might be able to greatly improve this art. Opportunity is always accompanied by danger. It's impossible to casually pick spirit medicines, Helian Sun Shui said, shaking her head. That's not for sure. Ling Han said. He thought of Shenyuan Ziguang. This person's luck was somewhat nature-defying, and treasures practically delivered themselves to his doorstep. Take the earth-overturning seal for example. Back then, it took the initiative to throw itself into this person's arms, and if it weren't for him acting fast enough, this mystical power would have become the other person's possession. The further they walked, the bigger the world became, but the riverbanks on both sides didn't change much. It was just that the river was widening, continuously widening from the original 30 meters or so to the current 300 meters, and it was still showing the trend of widening. Ling Han's heart moved, and he said, since this is the alternative dragon's transformation, then could this blood river be its blood vessels? Helian Sun Shui nodded. Previously, we were at the end of the blood vessels, so they were relatively thin, but the closer we are to the main blood vessels, the thicker they naturally are. Ling Han said regretfully, then this is dragon's blood. Unfortunately, it's corroded by some unknown power and can't be refined. I heard father say that there are occasionally 1 or 2 areas with uncontaminated pure blood. If we're lucky, we can still obtain it, Helian Sun Shui said, her eyes shining. For someone like her who possessed the bloodline of the dragon clan, it would be extremely beneficial for her to refine even a few drops of the sky dragon's blood. Ling Han nodded. The ghostly dragon cave had existed in the North Sea for an unknown number of years. Although it only opened once every 500 years, after so many years, the Helian tribe had naturally accumulated enough information. They walked for a while longer, and saw that Xin Yukai had stopped in front of them, as if she was waiting for them. Seeing them approach, Xin Yukai said very proudly, I didn't wait for you, I'm just tired from walking, so I want to rest for a while. Ling Han did not pay any attention to her and just brushed past her, causing Xin Yukai to swing her sword fiercely. If it was not for the fact that their abilities were too far apart, she really wanted to chase after Ling Han and chop off his head. She angrily followed behind the trio. Although she was very proud, she knew that this place was dangerous. Following Ling Han and the others would greatly increase their safety. Crash! A huge splash suddenly appeared in the river in front of them, and a blood-red object could be faintly seen flashing by, but it was unclear what it was. Ling Han activated the Eye of Truth and caught sight of a long shadow under the water. It felt like a snake, and its speed was extremely fast. In an instant, it had drifted out of his field of vision, and Ling Han didn't manage to get a closer look. However, Ling Han did not chase after it with his gaze, and instead stared at the bottom of the river, asking, what does the dragon's blood grass look like? It's completely blood-red, and usually has 3 leaves. The leaves have dragon-shaped veined patterns. The older it is, the more leaves it has, and the clearer the dragon-shaped veined patterns are. Helian Sun Shui was startled, but still answered. Ling Han's expression became even weirder, and he asked, does the dragon's blood grass all grow on the shore? Helian Sun Shui nodded. At the back, Xin Yukai heard it clearly, and could not help but reveal a disdainful expression. Was there something wrong with this human's head? He still had to get to the bottom of such a simple matter. Ling Han pointed at the river, and said, I found a stalk of dragon's blood grass there, and just like you said, it has 3 leaves, and there are veined patterns on the leaves. What? Helian Sun Shui cried out in shock. How is that possible? The dragon's blood grass all grows on the shore. Ling Han thought for a moment, and said with a smile, you guys only find the dragon's blood grass on the shore because you guys have never gone to the bottom of the river to look for it. Helian Sun Shui thought for a moment, and agreed. The river of blood had an astonishing corrosiveness, and even people like them who possessed the bloodline of true dragons and had cultivated a strong physique could not withstand it. It would not be long before their skin would rot, and if they stayed for too long, even their bones would melt. Everyone naturally treated the river of blood as a forbidden area, and there were terrifying monsters in the river, so they were even more unwilling to go down. Xin Yukai continued to twitch her mouth. Her first impression of Ling Han was too bad, and she subconsciously took every word he said to be playing to the gallery. What dragon's blood grass growing at the bottom of the river? Who are you trying to fool? This river of blood obstructs vision and seals divine sense, so how did you get here? Wait here. Ling Han was about to jump into the river. Be careful, Helian Sun Shui hurriedly said. Though the corrosion of this river of blood was not fast, its effects were stubborn, and it was not something that could be resisted by any origin power at all. Furthermore, the sea race knew that the wider the river of blood, the stronger the corrosive power, and the faster it would act up, and the more terrifying the monsters hidden in the water would be. Ling Han nodded, and then with a leap he had already entered the river of blood. Xin Yukai could not help but be astonished. This human was definitely stupid. Not only did he boast, he actually jumped into the river. Was he courting death? She snorted and said, I'm just afraid that once he enters, he won't be able to come out. Hellion Sunshue was furious and said coldly, Xinyu Kai, I didn't make a sound all the way here, not because I'm afraid of you, but because I'm giving face to the Xinyu royal family. But you keep making trouble time and time again, thinking that I don't dare to make a move on you? Xinyu Kai could not help but be intimidated by her imposing manner, and only now realized that she was the most outstanding pearl of the young generation of the North Sea royal family. Her bloodline was extremely pure, and she was an existence even more resplendent than herself. However, she naturally had pride in her heart, and said defiantly, Did I say anything wrong? That's a river of blood that flows with the corrupt blood of Lord Alternative Dragon, representing death and withering. Not to mention that he's only in the deity transformation tier. Even a great elite of the Shattering Void tier wouldn't be able to match him. That's someone else, Hellion Sunshue said coldly. Xinyu Kai was startled. She meant that Ling Han could do things that even Shattering Void tier elites couldn't. Where did this confidence come from? This woman was really stupid, being bewitched by a stinky man to the point that she couldn't even understand the simplest logic. At this moment, the river of blood rippled, and a huge splash soared into the skies. Then, Ling Han could be seen treading on the waves, holding the Revere Life Sword in his hand. A cold light blazed, and he slashed downwards. Voila! A long blood-colored shadow also charged out of the water's surface. At first glance, it was a large snake that was about 9 meters long, but if one looked more closely, they would discover that this creature actually didn't have eyes, nostrils, or ears. It only had a large, round mouth, and when it opened, a circle of sharp teeth was revealed. Phone reading was more refreshing. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.